Want me to take the roll?
Yeah, why
Well,
don't we call the meeting to order?
Yeah.
And Clark, why don't you take the roll?
Okay, thanks, Dart. Ellen Devereaux. Amanda Matusik.
Clerk, you might have to give them a little bit more time because they have to unmute themselves sometimes. Let me just see if Ellen's on here.
Ellen,
I don't see her.
okay. Amanda Matusik.
Yep, I'm here.
Jeannie Orr.
Right here.
Tina Lee.
Here.
Chelsea Ratner.
Present.
Jill Connell.
Jill emailed me just an hour or two ago saying she couldn't make it.
Catherine Harder.
Present.
Chairman Strayer.
Present.
Oh, and clerk, we have a new member of the CIC. Ashok Ramsubramanian.
Yes, that's me, Ashok Ramasubramanian. I am here, present.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we'd like to formally welcome you to the committee, and we're very happy that you decided to join us.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me part of this committee. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Great. Okay, Laura sent out the meeting minutes for February 8th and March 4th of this year. Why don't we look at the February 8th minutes? Did anyone have any corrections or changes that they would like to make to those minutes? They're included in the packet.
I only saw a very minor typo in line 131 for aggregation.
So we're getting a little background noise. If you're not speaking, you put yourself on mute, although it may be coming from the phone. If you are on a telephone, you have to actually mute yourself with your telephone mute button. That's better. Okay, so what was the correction, Tina?
Very minor, line 131, the word aggregation. I think it just had like a, it was minorly misspelled.
Okay, so we'll just fix that spelling.
Yep.
Do we have any other corrections on February's minutes? Hearing none, I make a motion that we adopt the February 5th minutes with the correction that Tina has made to them.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I didn't see. I'm sorry, I didn't see who seconded the motion.
Tina?
Okay.
Oh.
Do we have any nays? Okay.
I abstain. I wasn't at the meeting. Kathy?
Kathy, what?
I wasn't at the meeting. I abstain.
Okay, that's fine.
I think I should abstain as well. Obviously, I was not at the meeting.
Okay.
Well,
That's
is
fine.
that the normal protocol? Because I wasn't at the meeting either. So do I need to abstain?
I don't know if you can judge whether they're accurate.
That's true. That's true. I guess I'll abstain.
Like if you watch the video or listen to the recording, but it's okay if you, then you can abstain. That's totally fine.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay. The March 4th meetings, the March 4th meeting. Were there any comments or corrections we wanted to make to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll motion that we adopt the minutes as issued. Do we have a second?
So Chelsea should be the second. And
I second.
and I think because there were only 3 members, because there was no quorum, if the 2 of you are comfortable with voting aye, we can just do you two.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Unless somebody watched the video, because that one does not have a video. Nope. So let's just do it that way.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. Privilege of the floor. Do we have anyone, Laura, that would like to speak?
Yeah, I've heard from Connie Trigger, and I think there may be one other person on the line. So, Connie, if you want to go first, and then we'll just kind of do a call out for anybody else who's on the call that wants to speak under privilege of the floor.
Sure. Hi, my name is Connie Trigger, and this is my husband, Paul.
Hello.
And we live at 4072 Windsor Drive. And just so I make good use of your time, I've written my comments out so that I can be concise. And I wanted to give you the perspective of the residents of the area of Windsor Drive about the possibility of extending Windsor to River Road through the proposed Kelt's Farm development. And a number of us have been reviewing the minutes and some meeting videos of the various committees that have to sign off on this. And it became clear to us that our stance on the issue has been extremely understated. So I couldn't find a description of the role of your committee on the town website, but based on the name, I'm guessing that you look at environmental issues in the town. And this project does have an impact on the environment, but it needs to be looked at in a bigger context. Right now, we have a group of almost 40 households who are on Windsor Drive or just in from it on several of the side streets who have come together to strongly oppose this cut through. At the May Planning Board meeting, Ms. Robertson read letters from us during the privilege of the floor period for about an hour and 15 minutes. The special Planning Board meeting this past Monday to discuss the project lasted almost 4 hours. And as I've listened to the videos and read the minutes of other committees, they don't reflect the level of opposition that has been expressed at the Planning Board level. We've shared with the Planning Board our frustration with the use of the comprehensive plan to justify the cut through when it contains many contradictory statements that would support our objections. We watch video of Planning Board members saying, we'll have to dumb down this information so residents can understand it, or there's a stub road there, they should have known. How many of those residents do you think actually read that before they bought their homes? In the plan, we read about the importance of connectivity, but we see that there are many routes already for people to get where they need to go. And we wonder, what would be desirable about purchasing a home in a development with one short road if it was going to potentially have over 900 cars pass through it? And we see many other cul-de-sacs or neighborhoods in Niskuna which do not have cut-throughs. And we also understand that these low traffic settings are actually desirable to people. We read about the value of the characteristics of different neighborhoods in Niskuna, but little acknowledgement of the impact on our street by the development in connection to Kelt's Farm. We hear about reducing carbon emissions, but calculate the metric tons of carbon that would be dumped on Windsor Drive instead of River Road, a less densely populated thoroughfare. And we hear about increased wait times that would result at the intersection of Windsor and Van Antwerp with cars sitting there emitting pollutants, and not to mention the loss of green space and possible disruption of wetlands on the Kelt's Farm. We hear about speeding issues that already exist on Windsor Drive, and although we would welcome measures to address that, we question how adding over 900 vehicles a day would help. We listened to a representative of Creighton Manning summarize the traffic study done for the developer and hear the Planning Board push back on the numbers in the report, with board members countering Creighton Manning's figure of 90% diversion onto Windsor, with their own predictions of the amount of traffic that would be generated by having a cut through the River Road, and their own preferences about taking shortcuts. The rep was asked to make up new charts showing the data in ranges instead, although it came across to listeners as, those numbers are too high, give us lower ones. In the original report, it says the assessment when talking about the diversion, and in an updated report, it becomes the worst case assessment of 90% diversions. In the original report, the summary includes this phrase: it is noted that the connection may change the character and functional classification of the roadway due to increased through traffic. In the updated report, this reference to the change to the character of the neighborhood and therefore the neighborhood itself is removed. We look at the scope of the traffic study and recognize that it is not wide enough, meaning the estimated number of additional vehicles on Windsor may be underestimated. We hear from the developer about what he is installing at his own expense, but recognize that any need for them is self-created. He brings up the idea of turning Windsor Drive into a boulevard, drawing board members into a discussion of an impractical option that would come at great taxpayer expense, again, creating a fix for a problem of his making. Several of our residents have had their homes professionally appraised to see how the increased traffic would impact their home values and learned they could decrease from 10 to 35%. In addition to changing the character of the neighborhood, lowering property values, loss of green space, carbon emissions, and other factors, we consider how the safety of the children in the neighborhood, teenage drivers going to school, and users of the multi-use path would be impacted by connecting Windsor to a busy, high-volume county road. So I've only touched upon the objections the residents of the Windsor Drive area have with the proposed cut through, but I hope that I've been able to give you a sense of our position. And before giving it your stamp of approval, I'd like to ask you to reach out to people who live on the street and talk with them about it. And I have over 60 email addresses I can share with you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connie. Laura, do we have anyone else who would like to speak?
I did want to note for the record that Ellen Daviero is attending by phone and is at the meeting. And I did see Daniela sign on. Daniela, are you wishing to speak under privilege of the floor?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Just listening? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody else that I don't see on the call that would like to speak under privilege of the floor?
Yes, Laura, this is Joel. I just wanted to comment on what Connie just said, is that the sewer main is not of my making. You know, 24 new houses doesn't cause me to put in a 15-inch main sewer line. That's a town problem.
So I don't see anyone else start. I think we're okay.
Okay, hearing that, we'll close privilege of the floor and move on to item 5, which is the environmental assessment form referrals. And what we're going to discuss tonight is EAF 2020-4, 2538 River Road, which is a major subdivision, average density development, and the applicant is asking for a special use permit. In our packet, we have a layout of the development, the EAF form, as well as a traffic study that has been submitted of the area by Creighton Manning. So at this stage, I don't think we've seen the traffic study. Laura, do you want to summarize it for us, or Joel can, or?
Sure. So it's attached in your packet. I'm just going to scroll up here. I think the numbers that the planning board have really been looking at are the additions in the peak hours and the total cars that are going through. Sorry, I had scrolled down to the plan. Now I have to go back up. Oops. So, on the, oops, page 7 of 12, the table that I think that we kind of take a look at. So I know we talked about this a little bit before, but what the developer did was he took numbers that the Schenectady County had used, traffic counting numbers when they were preparing for the River Rosendale Road traffic circle. And that was in 2019, I believe. And then they took a DOT count from 2015. Joel, correct me if I'm wrong. And then they also reached out to a like a kind of data aggregate collector that knows where people's cell phones go. And so, like, if a person in a car hit, say, the River Rosendale intersection, then they hit the GE Research Circle, and then their GPS pinged off of the Windsor Van Antwerp Road intersection. They were using like that section of cars that were, that were making those types of, like, from GE Research Circle down to Windsor, that kind of section, to evaluate the number of people that were doing those trips. It's kind of like an origin destination study, but very specific to those intersections. And then they estimated how many people would be diverted by if there was a cut through, or if there was a connection that was made from Windsor/River Road, over to that exact intersection. And they estimated 90% diversion of the cars instead of going up to Research Circle and then back down to the Van Antwerp Windsor connection. They think about 90% of those vehicles would probably take the Windsor Drive connection the way that the current configuration was. And so if that was true based on the data that they figured out, it would be an AM peak addition of cars of 131, a PM peak of 63, and a total new traffic on local network, if you're adding together like daily and the peaks, of 932 cars. And just want to follow up on, I think the CDTC looked at it, and so did our TDE, and they both felt that 90% of the cars being diverted onto Windsor was probably a reasonable estimate, and you definitely want to go higher rather than lower so that you're making sure you're accounting for everything. And just to be clear, the planning board and a couple of the residents have also said it might make sense to include additional intersections in the evaluation, and that is not part of the study that is attached here. So it's really only, it's looking at the existing traffic counts on River, Windsor, and, that kind of area, and then taking that kind of origin destination study and figuring out how many cars would be diverted onto Windsor. That makes sense. It's not a traffic study that you're probably used to seeing, and I know that, some of you are pretty new to these, so if you have some questions, feel free to ask me about it.
Laura, I have a question about the destination. So if we look at figure 3, and there's several routes that are there. Now, when you had mentioned this, you said that they looked at traffic generated between the circle and the potential cut in River Road that would occur, the connection. Did they know where these cars were? Did they map the car destination? So if you know that if a car was going down River Road, that it would end up at the intersection of Windsor?
Yes, Dark, this is Joel. The Google data from October 2019 gives both a origin and destination. So say when you look at that table, we know that essentially 2,000 mothers and fathers, they're dropping their kids off at the high school. And so many of them take the Riverdale cut through, and then the rest of them go down to the circle around and over Van Antwerp, and end up at that Van Antwerp Windsor intersection. And I think all the traffic engineers kind of agreed that 900, and a lot of the people agree that is that 950 cars extra a day on that street is already an excessive amount. And there's really no need to add in other destinations like, say, somebody's going to the casino, which seems crazy to me, or, the Ellis Hospital, or feasibly, Balltown Road. But, that 950 cars is just going to go up. So it is already high, and I think a lot of people agree that it's a very high number.
Yeah, one of the questions I had about the traffic study primarily had to do with people perhaps going the other way. And certainly the high school, I think people go stack up on Windsor because of the ease of getting into the high school, because they can make a right-hand turn into the parking lot when they get on Knott Street East. And I believe that that's the reason why the cars stack up that way. It's very easy. But I was looking at the traffic going the other way, particularly in the PM. And when I look at the traffic on River Road, I think the report said there was 1,200 cars during peak. And given the fact that I believe that Knowles has 2,200 people that work there every day, and I can tell you that people aren't carpooling like that, I would venture to say that the traffic on River Road is undercounted. And where that comes from is if that's through traffic, it makes making a potential right or left onto River Road from the connector much more difficult, much more arduous, particularly typically when I leave work from Knowles, I'm waiting 3 or 4 minutes to make a left-hand turn. Or
Yeah, but now,
a couple minutes for right-hand turn.
Yeah, but the circle is going to mediate that. So really, your concern would be people leaving Knowles, going east, okay, on River, and our ultimate destination, say, is Route 7 headed towards Troy. Okay,
No,
so would that person turn up this cut through, go to Balltown Road, down Balltown, and then like left on Union, okay? And that's very traffic intensive. I would think that they would go to the circle, and go down River or up Rosendale at least, and then over, Mohegan or something.
My concern, Joel, would be like in the AM, right? I mean, right now you have 2 cut-throughs through the community. And basically, if someone's coming up River Road, because that would be, if I was going to the high school, I was looking for a cut-through. If I was coming from the west part or the northwest part of town, I would go on VA because I'd get there quicker. So from the high school standpoint, we are going to get people that are traveling west along River Road. And what I'm wondering is during rush hour, when you have a lot of traffic on River Road, is someone really going to sit there and take a left-hand turn into traffic and wait upwards to, 2 or 3, 4 minutes in order to make that left-hand turn rather than go up to the center to Van Antwerp?
Yeah, it's a good point. So really that traffic would be in different directions from the peak.
I mean, the traffic goes both ways. I drive this every day, and the traffic on River Road.
That's right. I mean, the traffic goes both ways. So that's even more, aggravating for the residents that you have the 950 cars, in the AM, the peak going to the high school, then the PM leaving the high school, and combined with, the cut-through traffic for Knowles and R&D. But I don't think the cut-through traffic for Knowles and R&D would take Van Antwerp, myself. But
no, I mean, as someone who drives there, there's basically Lamplighter, and then there's these other roads to cut through. And making a left-hand turn to cut through the neighborhoods or a right-hand turn is very arduous. I would venture to say that most people would go up to the circle and around. And that's why I was just looking at this.
And you're cut by Chelsea.
Undercounted
you're cut
so
by
much
Chelsea's
on River
house.
Road.
You're going by Chelsea's house then on Mill Park. He doesn't want that.
Anyway, thanks for answering my question.
Yep. Hey, Laura, before we get too far, I sent you a message that, last night, Daniela.
Hey, Joel. I saw your message, but I would caution introducing plans that haven't been reviewed by the planning board, because the seeker process, I don't think, would be supportive of adding an entirely different plan that the CAC would be reviewing for environmental impacts. I think that that would be a pretty big break in the process. So I think that what the CAC needs to review is what is in their packet, and then if they have conditions with the seeker determination that they would want to pass on to the planning board or the town board, they can. But at this juncture, like, they are given a specific thing to look at. Yeah.
Or can we review it on Monday with the planning board at least?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm muting.
Does anyone else have any questions for Joel or in general?
This is Ashok. May I ask a question, please? First meeting, so if I do something wrong, my apologies in advance. So as I understand, we've heard a lot of opposition to why this cut through is not welcomed by the residents. As I understand, the main reason the cut through is proposed is to have better access to Blatnick Park and better access to the Blatnick Park area from old Niskayuna. Am I reading that correctly?
So it's a connectivity of a large number of things, and I actually think that the access that is supported by the comprehensive plan would be more actually the direct access to the town center overlay district is probably addressed in the comprehensive plan. So the reverse direction, although there isn't any question that it would be a connection of Old Niskayuna, more directly to Blatnick Park. But I think if you're looking at connectivity, it's between neighborhoods and it's between the town center overlay district and parks. But I wouldn't say that it's exclusively set up just so that people would have better access to Blatnick Park, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. I'm still trying to wrap my idea around this thing. Like what is the major benefit by this cut through? Like what is the town gaining? You mentioned increased connectivity, but like in the traffic study, I'm not seeing anything about, it's going to do such and such as a benefit. And I'm trying to get a grip on what the benefit is so that I can really weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah, from a conductivity standpoint, I was on the master plan when we looked at this. And if you look at communities where they have basically cul-de-sacs on major thoroughfares like River Road, what that does is it forces all the traffic to go on these major thoroughfares. And what generally happens is the thoroughfares now become dividers between the communities. Like if you look at Route 7 is a big barrier. So part of the goal of putting all the conductivity into a town plan is to ensure that the traffic is distributed and people aren't filtering on major roads, which end up becoming a barrier. And in general, there will be increased traffic on the roads when you put the connector, but it can work both ways. For example, if people on Windsor wanted to go to the park, they wouldn't have to drive a circuitous route to get to the park. They could go to the connector. Likewise, the people that are in this proposed community would provide access to the town center as opposed to having to drive all the way up to the GE Circle and go around and come back, or go all the way down River Road to Rosendale to come back up. If you look at that section of area, it provides conductivity for the residents both ways, local residents.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yep.
And Ashok, we talked about this a little bit at the planning board meeting last night, but I mean, generally speaking, the country is kind of flip-flop. Before World War II, there was a lot of interconnection with all the roads. And then after World War II, when they started building suburbs everywhere, they got away from the connectivity, but it also created very isolated roads. And like Dart was saying, created kind of unintended consequences with neighborhoods that weren't connected and these large arterials that were dividing people. And it was also very difficult for like transit and services and emergency vehicles and actually bicycles and pedestrians to get to places because there was so little connection, and it was then very difficult for bicycles and pedestrians to cross these very large arterials. So the benefits to connectivity, you know, they directly connect neighborhoods, they decrease vehicle miles traveled, they spread the traffic out across the town, and, you know, they help with connectivity for all different modes of transportation. And they do recognize this, like it's probably some hybrid between, you know, pre-World War II and post-World War II. It probably needs to be some kind of a hybrid. It's easy to do in new developments. It's harder to do, you know, when you're retrofitting developments because of the increase in traffic on residential neighborhoods. So a lot of the places that do require connectivity, and connectivity can be written into codes, they require it and then also require mitigation, traffic calming mitigation to any of the neighborhoods that are affected, because there is a recognition that when you're making that connectivity, it is increasing traffic. So I don't know if that helps at all too.
It helps. And a quick follow-up question, like what about, is this the time where we discuss bike path and bicycle connectivity? You know, the Mohawk Hudson, that's a big bike trail. Or do we have a separate segment of the meeting where we discuss the bicycles?
No, feel free to bring it up.
Okay, as an avid biker who bikes throughout the winter, I bring it up. Since the Complete Streets Committee looked at it, and so I'm assuming there will be like a bike lane for good access to the bike path, and one of those yellow flashing light things that is currently on River Road, very nicely marked for the cars.
Yes.
So yes, to a dedicated bike lane, not just a shared use road.
It'll be a as depicted in the plan now. It's a multi-use path, which means it's for walkers, bikers, all modes of transportation.
So it's like a continuation of the path that's on Windsor, right? That leads up to it. So you're probably familiar with that path, right? So it'll just continue, and then it'll have, and then and then when it comes out of the development, it'll go straight into Blatnick Park.
Yeah. So Asha, can you see the screen now? Can you see my sharing screen? This is the existing bike trail up here. Oh, I'm muted. Am I muted?
No, I hear you.
No, we can hear you and we can see you.
This is the existing bike trail up here. Sometimes when I'm sharing screen, I can't see what I'm doing. So this would be the proposed place that it would go, and then it would curl around. So it would be built, you know, approximately the same way, same width, and mirror the one that's already there, wind through the development. And then this would be the new crossing that would be perpendicular to the road, which is pretty important because right now, right here, it crosses at a skew. And anytime that you lengthen the amount of time that somebody's crossing a road, you know, and also for sight distances and stuff, this is not great. So if we can make this safer, what we would do is bring it over here, have it be a perpendicular crossing. We looked at it, I think the last time you guys saw, we looked at it in the sort of a mid-block crossing to separate the bicycles from the vehicles. But the county required that it be moved back to this curb cut over here so that there would be a single point where people were looking for traffic to cross, cars, people, and that way everybody would be expecting crossings there. Does that make sense? But so yeah, this right here in the plans is the multi-use path that would be dedicated for the entire length of the plan.
And there will be like some kind of separation between the fast road and the multi-use path. Like I'm assuming an elevated curb or some such.
Yeah, currently Windsor has a grass strip, and they're pretty effective. I wouldn't expect curbing in this project unless there is some reason that you couldn't fit everything. It would probably be a strip of grass, like green area.
Quick follow-up question, please. Like what is the guarantee that like somebody's not going to get run over by a really fast vehicle? So if it's just a matter of somebody losing control of their steering, I would be more concerned. And again, speaking as a biker, that's an important consideration for our community.
So sorry, with that question, are you asking, do you feel as a biker that a curb is safer than a grass strip? Because there's no guarantee of anything, obviously.
I totally get it. Like if somebody is drunk, then they can easily jump the curb. But speaking in terms of probabilities, if somebody is aware that there is an elevated curb all along the road, then the likelihood of them just crossing over is low, as opposed to just flat throughout and with no separation. Then the likelihood is high.
So I would say the plans as they are don't show a curb. If we're going through the environmental impact statement and you feel that a curb is substantially important to the environmental review, we could add it in there. If you just think as a note, the planning board should discuss it, we can also just send that on as a note. But I don't know what the engineering standards are for when a curb would be applied. I don't know. There may be some engineering standards out there that say, a certain distance from the road, there should be a curb. If it like on Windsor, I don't know if you've biked up and down the bike path on Windsor or Knott Street. That grass strip's like 5 or 6 feet, and there's wings on the road. So, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that one. Put that one out there.
I'm not an expert on civil engineering codes either. All I'm saying is, having biked for many decades, like some kind of separation between the traffic and the biker is always welcome. And what prompts me to bring this up is like so many tragic accidents. I'm sure you have all seen those ghost bikes that sit as a silent reminder when a biker is struck by traffic.
Well, I know like the running group runs on that path a lot. Like Tina and I run on that, and I feel pretty safe running on that bike path with the grassy barrier. I don't know how you feel about it, Tina.
I feel like it's good the way it is. It's, as we talk about increased traffic, it's hard to imagine. So the traffic site I have trouble with is I see these numbers and it's hard for me to envision like what it actually would feel like. And I do I agree that safety is an issue. And, we've seen some cars kind of drive not so carefully through the neighborhood, not just on Windsor, but through, those other connecting roads. So, it's hard for me to envision the increased traffic and how that may or may not change the character of the neighborhood.
It is my understanding that once the cut through is developed, the speed limits are going to change. Surely when somebody is going to a dead end and somebody is going to take a turn into River Road, those are 2 different speed limits, right?
No, the speed limits wouldn't change. And I think that anybody who has looked at this recognizes that if the connection is made, that it should be made with mitigation to Windsor Drive that would continuously slow down cars. There would be no change to a speed limit. And I think that the town would want to, and this is kind of what we were talking about with balancing, want to discourage traffic. So the encouragement is for our residents to have that benefit of connectivity, for the people, you know, who live along River Road or in that new development to be able to get to Co-op or ShopRite or wherever they want to go. Starbucks, one of my personal favorites, but not at the expense of people who already live there. And so the way that you can potentially mitigate it would be with traffic calming, you know, and then doing everything you can to discourage kind of the through traffic. So you want the neighborhood connectivity, but you don't want the through traffic. And Tina, to your question, and I admit I have not done these calculations, but they seem to be accepted. And the planning board was looking at it. I think Chris LaFlemme did the calculation. In the peak hours, it would be an addition of two and a half cars a minute, I believe. And I think that you can just do that by dividing the number of cars that are there on the peak by 60. I mean, I think that's probably how they did the math. I haven't done it, but I'm expecting that that's 2.5 cars per minute. I did reach out to, you know, RTDE and some separate traffic analyses, because, you know, we look at those numbers and I'm not always sure exactly what that means. Like we said, 25% increase. Like, would you be able to notice that? And I think that the general conclusion is yes, you would notice that addition of traffic. And I think that that is kind of just a standard acceptance that you have to look at. It is a lot of additional traffic and it would be noticeable to the people who live there. So then the question is, you know, can you mitigate it with traffic calming? And help? Is the connectivity worth it? Those are the kind of things that you're looking at with the traffic study. But I think that it is important to acknowledge that it is a lot of traffic. It would be noticeable to the people who live there. And so you need to take that into a balance with what the other benefits are. That is a cost. There's no question.
Laura, I have a quick question. It's Amanda. What is the speed limit going to be on the new connector, and what is the speed limit currently on Windsor Drive, and are they going to be the same or about the same, or, you know, what is the status of that?
So that's a really good question. We see the speed limit stuff come up a lot when people are complaining about speeding on their streets. The town is not allowed to regulate speed limits within its jurisdiction. There's a lot of weird New York laws that happen. So the speed limit on residential roads that are owned by the town of Niskayuna is 30 miles per hour. If you are standing in your yard and a car goes by you at 30 miles per hour, it is fast and they're not speeding. When I'm driving through residential neighborhoods, I'm not comfortable driving 30 miles per hour, and I don't care what residential neighborhood it is, that is fast. But that is, unless the town petitions like New York State or does something, all of our residential roads are 30 miles per hour. And that would be the case for Windsor, and that would be the case for the connecting roads. The roads that have differing speed limits are owned by the county and the state.
That being said, though, if you were to do traffic calming and narrow the road or make it less, I think people go the speed they feel comfortable at on a road. So there's a lot of things that you can do to slow the traffic down.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Windsor is very open, and it's a visual corridor, and it's kind of an accepted. We've even had, I think, people stand before the planning board. I don't know if they've ever come to the CAC, but they've even explained how miles per hour are calculated, and it's not necessarily based on safety. It's based on what the average speed is that a car travels down a road. I think I heard DOT say this once, and narrowing the visual corridor, putting things in front of people that make them stop and pause and kind of get out of that mindset of just, mindlessly, like on autopilot, getting to somewhere, breaks that sort of lack of attention makes people slow down. If they don't feel comfortable going fast, they will slow down. That's what, and so we haven't really looked at this, and it would definitely have to be looked at, but like, I think it's very clear that Windsor Drive would need some kind of a road diet and a narrowing of the visual corridor.
Yeah, and it's very effective. I remember when we were in Austria, they have major highways that people are going 100 kilometers, and you go into a town and they have a traffic calming device as you go into town, and you want to go, the equivalent of 20 miles per hour, because that traffic calming device is so effective. And it's just a minor narrowing of the road. And in the case of the ones I saw in Austria, it was an island. And that just slows everybody down. I think, when you look at the development that Joel has there, though, the fact that you have to make a sharp turn at the end of Windsor is going to really discourage people from going fast.
Yeah, so bends and sharp turns and stop signs are actually not considered traffic calming. Any traffic engineer will tell you that stop signs are not considered traffic calming, and they are not used in a traffic calming situation, because if they're not warranted, they can actually create unsafe situations, and they where cars don't stop and people have the expectation of them stopping. So there's but yeah, there's a lot of really good literature out there about the treatments that you can do. And I think that curves are definitely one thing. Where Windsor is wide open is the existing part, as you approach like Van Antwerp. And I think, that's partly, there's no on-street parking. It's a very wide right of way, and the trees are small. So there's really nothing that is visually impeding anybody there.
Laura, is there anything that can be done to improve the traffic calming on Windsor, at least near the intersection with the new connection? And has that been proposed or thrown about yet?
I mean, we had some brainstorming ideas that were not popular. I think that probably what would make the most sense would be to have a traffic engineer who is familiar with traffic calming techniques and can study that corridor. The things that would make the most sense there would probably be, I love brainstorming, but if we're really getting down into it, I think probably you would say, you would want to see traffic mitigation measures implemented, to sufficient, traffic engineering standards that would slow cars down, and then have an engineer figure it out.
So I have a question in terms of like process, because, in terms of approving, so the planning department approved the cut through, correct? So now if we all agree that there's safety issues and we would need to apply traffic mitigation solutions, then in terms of like deciding, like, do we decide, would the decision be like, yes, we're going to like allow this to go through before understanding what the costs and necessary traffic mitigation, decisions would be? How does that work?
Yeah, so the planning department or the planning board, they're not interchangeable, but I think you probably meant the planning board, hasn't fully decided on the option. They haven't taken a vote on the recommendation, and actually the full decider of the configuration for the special use permit is the town board. What you guys, I think, would be looking at is we'll go through the questions in the environmental impact statement, and you have to balance the environmental impacts, of this proposal and decide. And we don't typically look at projects that are on this large of a scale, I think. So it's completely fine to just go through the process very, very slowly. And I know, Ashak, this is a first thing, but we will go through the questions and discuss each environmental impact as it relates to the proposal. And then at the end, you take all those findings and you decide whether the findings add up to an environmental impact that's big enough to warrant an environmental impact statement, which would require the developer to look at alternatives and alternative configurations that would potentially lessen the environmental impacts that you're looking at. Or you take that all into account and you recognize where there are environmental impacts, but you feel that they can be small and mitigated with, things that can be included in your recommendation. So that's what you guys typically do, is that you go through the EIF and then, because we have typically small projects, and you can say, yeah, that's the neg deck. You don't see such huge environmental impacts that you would want to see alternatives developed, but you do see some environmental impacts. And so you would want those mitigated with certain suggestions that you send to the lead agency. So those are kind of the things that we're reviewing when we go through the questions. And ultimately, you're making a recommendation on the full environmental impact of the project, which includes traffic. That's why we're having such a detailed traffic study. It's a kind of an interesting site. The forest was logged prior to the developer owning it. Well, some of it's field, although there's beautiful lupins, which Joel was talking about at the beginning. So there's not as much clearing as we would typically see with a 14-acre parcel. He's trying to avoid the wetlands. Some of the things that would normally really, I think, fixate our attention are maybe not as big of an issue, whereas traffic may be, the biggest environmental impact that you're looking at. And so you have to mitigate that or look at if you think that justifies requiring an environmental impact statement, and that would be your recommendation, or if you feel that can be mitigated with traffic calming or other measures. Those are the things that we're talking. Dart, jump in. I don't want to misrepresent the process.
No, that's fine. I'm just letting you finish. I have some other questions about the traffic study and some of the assumptions, but go ahead.
No, if you wanted to tag on, I'm just trying to clarify what our role is there.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine.
Laura, one more quick question regarding the traffic, please. You sent me an email with a PDF attachment of comments from the residents. I'm always trying to weight both sides of the equations, and you all made some really good points about. I think Dot said something about Route 7 and how that's a major divider between communities. And I can kind of see the interconnectivity argument there. My question is, has the town heard from people who would benefit from the connectivity and say, hey, I think this would benefit me? Because when I read the PDF file, it was uniformly negative opinion. Some 25 to 30 people, mainly residents of that neighborhood, saying, hey, we don't like this. So I want to see if other people for whom this would benefit have spoken up, and are their opinions collected somewhere.
Yes, Ashak, I sent you a conglomeration of opinions quickly because it was new and you asked. And so that wasn't the full spectrum of emails, but it does give you a sense of what the issues are for the residents that are living there and the type of comments that we get, so that you can understand where the residents are coming from. But we have received emails in favor of the connection, not as many. I think we've probably gotten 6 or 7 comments in favor of the connection, as compared to 50 against. But when you're planning, you do sometimes need to factor in, we call it the silent majority. I'm not saying that there's a huge silent majority here, but when people don't mind a project or like it, they're typically not motivated to come and speak. And the ones that are the most affected negatively are typically very motivated to speak. That's not downplaying the concerns of the people that speak at all, but you do want to balance the fact that the people that you will get the most comments from are typically the ones that are most negatively affected. We do have some people who have asked for the connection and supported it. And we have mentioned this before. Right now, there is traffic that winds through kind of the like Chestnut, Fox Hollow, Brittany, Briar Ridge. There's cars that wind through there off of Riverdale now and Linwood. And there's a potential, and those streets are small, and Windsor is built larger, and it was in our comprehensive plan to be a connector. It's been on the roads. So theoretically, you would be taking some of the traffic that's winding through roads that weren't meant to handle these traffic and putting it on a larger connector street that was actually has an 80-foot right of way and was meant and is built wider to be able to accommodate that traffic. So sometimes some of the people who live on those smaller roads are in favor of the connection. And I think I've also seen people that live farther away that are in favor of the connection. But the majority of people that speak are directly impacted and they are not in favor.
Yeah. To put it also in perspective, when Windsor Drive was originally developed, the bike path was not on Windsor Drive. And when the bike multi-use path was put in, there was a tremendous amount of opposition from people and residents in that neighborhood because they felt that it would severely impact the value of their houses and cause increasing crime and a lot of other things. So some of it is definitely the neighborhood's going to change. And I think that change motivates residents to basically really hold the town to task. And I can speak for myself living on Morgan Avenue when they were putting Hummingbird through Morgan to Village to Hummingbird provides a great cut through to avoid all the mess up at Union and Route 7. And we were very, very much opposed to that, but the town put the road through and then made it one way to mitigate the traffic. And after that happened for about a year and a half, the residents, including myself, petitioned the town to remove that one-way traffic control because it ended up that the traffic really wasn't that bad. And people aren't really cutting through. And did the traffic increase on the road? Absolutely. It did increase a little bit because we had people from Hummingbird coming out to Route 7. But likewise, being on Morgan Avenue, if I wanted to go to Hannaford's, I can now go through Hummingbird. So there are negatives that happen in the neighborhood, but there's also benefits as well. And I would venture to say that if you asked my neighbors who were dead against this 20 years ago, they would say, no, it was a net positive. So it's very challenging sometimes to read percentage. I think you have to actually look at the comments that people say and then sort of evaluate whether you think that is, a large impact or not, or how likely is it to occur.
Hey, Art, this is Joel. That was actually my subdivision. Yeah. And I brought that up with somebody recently, is that when we had these same meetings for Oakmont, there was hundreds, I'd say 300-400 people. They couldn't even fit them in town hall. And they were all saying that was going to be a huge cut through from, Troy Road to Consol. And, I did the traffic studies. We all commented, the neighbors went crazy. And like you said, right at the entrance to Hummingbird, in Oakmont, we put in that triangular shaped island, and people just drive around it, you know what I mean? And it's not really a problem. The whole problem didn't materialize. But in saying that, I really think that this is a different beast and that Windsor will be a mess.
So I have a question about the traffic study. I'm looking at the additional traffic on the local network. And when you break it down into the 25, 50, 75, and 90% diversions, the additional traffic on the local network increases substantially. So for example, at the 25% diversion, you're only going to get 15% increase in the additional traffic, let's say on the daily load. But yet, if you get 90% diversion through that cut through, basically that jumps up to a 55% increase to the 432 cars. And my question is, if the traffic is coming through that way, why would there be additional traffic on that network, and why would it be substantially higher than what currently is there? It just seems to me that I don't understand how that particular calculation was done.
Well, I think the reason that we added that is that specifically Kevin Walsh lives on Whitmire, and he drives that drive every day, and he said that regardless of the 1 minute or 30-second savings or whatever the savings is going to be, like taking the Kelts Farm cut through, that he would still go up to the Circle and down Van Antwerp. All right. So he didn't agree with the 90%. So he just wanted to see the other figures in there. But, you know, Creighton Manning was my engineer, and the town's engineer, the TDE that was hired, is a GPI, right, Laura? GPI agreed with GPI came in at 85%. Creighton Manning was estimating 90%.
No, I'm not talking about the percent diversions. What I'm talking about is if this connection is made and I look at the 90% diversions, basically currently on a daily basis, let's say just going eastbound, I have 785 cars that go through that. So that's the utilization of Route A and B. And what I see is that, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, I see the number 432, and that's a 55% increase on that total number. So what I am interpreting that as is that's the increase of additional cars that would travel through that area. And I'm wondering, where is that number coming from, or how's that number calculated? Because if 90% of the total was going to go through the development on the local network, it wouldn't be 55%. It would be, where's the 432 cars coming from?
I think that answers your previous question. I think that's where it comes from. I mean, we'd have to specifically ask the traffic engineer, you know, but that is the other traffic that isn't the specific dropping your kid off at the high school traffic. That is not. Yeah, that's the Falltown Road to River Road traffic.
Yeah, you know, that was kind of what I was trying to explain at the beginning of the meeting. Like, they're finding an origin destination, and they're letting the GPS ping on certain points, and that those maps, they're showing the route that they're pinging on the GPSs when they're tracking where people are driving. Mm-hmm. And they're saying that 90% of the people that drive north on River hit the GE Research Circle and then come back and ping on the Windsor Van Antwerp connection, that 90% of those trips will be diverted onto Windsor, and beyond, like, they're not necessarily figuring out where those trips are coming from, like if they're coming from Colony or they're coming from Whitmire Drive. It's just that it's that bend. And I do think that it's probably important to the thresholds, I think, were asked for at the planning board meeting because we didn't have a TDE that had commented on them, and it was the first time that we've really seen a traffic study that is kind of predicting. I mean, the whole point was the planning board wanted to see, like, what's the diversion going to be, and we hadn't seen that before, and they wanted to see what the different thresholds were. But after they asked for those thresholds, I think based on the other people that we reached out to, the 90% is a good estimate.
Yeah, no, but what I'm looking at is if I look at the 90% diversion and I look at the total traffic column, which is the third column on there. So if I look at AM peak, let's say, there's 40 cars there. And then there's an additional 18 cars that go through that local network. But where is that? Where are those 18 cars? Because if I have a total of 40 cars, or if we go up to the next one, if I have a total of 785 cars going through that intersection on a daily basis, taking that route, why is it that now I'm getting 432 cars, additional cars on the local traffic? And when I take the two numbers and I actually do the math on that, I get 55%. I don't get 90%. So I'm wondering, it just doesn't make sense to me where that column comes from.
Well, are you still looking at table 4?
I'm looking at table 4. And I'm looking at the column. It says additional traffic on local network.
Laura, could you pop that up?
Oh, sure. Yes. Because I think, Dart, what you might be looking at, and here, I'll pop it up now, is, I mean, there is existing traffic on Windsor. Let me pull it up here. Oops. Can you guys see it? I'll make it bigger. Hold on. So you're saying here in the existing conditions.
Yeah, if you go to the third column of numbers here, that's the total traffic, right? So that's the addition of the two numbers. So that's the total traffic.
Eastbound on
and then
Windsor.
The column adjacent to that, the next one down on the right-hand side is additional traffic on local network.
Yeah.
And that number changes depending on the percentage. And my question is, when I look at the math, it doesn't seem to correspond to 90% of the total traffic. It corresponds to some other value. So I'm asking, where does that value come from and how's that calculated?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. So this is right now you have 785 daily cars on that road.
Yep.
These numbers, the 120, the 240, the 360, the 432, these are percentages of the cars that currently drive on River up to Research Circle eastbound. Wait a minute. There's two directions. I'm just going to do the north one because there's two directions, right? There's also people that come down Knott Street, hit the Windsor Van Antwerp intersection, go up to Research Circle, and then go back down River Road. So there's two directions that's coming from, eastbound, westbound. I don't know which one it is, but let's say like this is 785. They're saying that 25% of the people that are currently driving down Knott Street, hitting the Windsor Van Antwerp intersection, going up to Research Circle, and then back down River Road, that's 25%. So I'll do it in my head, right? So there's a total number, and the 25% should always be that total number.
The way I'm looking at it is you have local route A and local route B, and those are the two routes. Those are the blue and orange routes that are mapped out on the map in figure 3 and 4. Is that correct?
Yeah. Did they say what the total number is? I mean, I can figure it out.
Yeah, no, they have the numbers there, and the numbers are reflected in the table. So when you go to table 4, route A is one of the routes, and route B is the other route. So if we look at table, the figure above, and we look at the AM peak for the River Road, it's 20 cars, right? So if we come down to the road and we look at the corresponding point, the existing conditions here is 20 cars. So that's network A, or it could be network B, I guess, because they're both the same. I guess what I could see taking 90% of the 785 cars that currently go through the section from A and B, but I'm kind of surprised that there's such an increase in the numbers. I mean, 55% of the cars that already cut through there, are those the cars that are coming down Knott Street currently?
So it's not 55% of the existing conditions vehicle trips. It's 55% of this purple line, right? The people that are driving on the purple line. Well, the existing conditions are the people who live there and the people who are already using these cut throughs down here. That's the 785, right? they're saying that there's these cars that are currently doing this purple line that would now choose to go on this yellow line. Or sorry, it would be somewhere in here. This is Riverdale down here. So they're saying 90% of the cars that are driving on the purple line would choose to hang a left right here and then connect in with this yellow line.
So if I look at that, that is, let's just do the math here. So if I look at going, just take, it's 480 cars. That would be the daily average. See, I don't, I don't see the numbers reflected on the table. That's what my
Okay, wait. I know what number you're
concern.
asking for. Let me just figure it out. Hold on. Okay, so
Okay, I found it. Let's see, 480, but I don't see the 5, and there's the 500. Okay. So if you go into column 480 cars, right, that is figure 3 coming
yes.
down.
Yeah,
And then
okay,
you have,
right. 480. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you have 305. So if you go to the daily existing conditions, you have 305 and 480 cars, right? And you have 785 cars going through there. So are they saying that when we go down to the 90%, the 432 cars are 90% of the 480 cars in the existing conditions would be going through that? And then only 48 cars would be going down River Road to the circle?
Yes, they're saying 432 cars would choose Windsor, and 48 cars would still choose the purple path. That's exactly right.
So all the cars taking that route, the majority of them would not go up to the circle. So the traffic would be 10% of the traffic on River Road would basically be reduced to about 10% of the traffic on River Road because
Of those vehicle
of those
trips,
vehicles going in
because
that
there's
direction.
a ton of traffic on River Road, and not all of the traffic that
Okay.
drives up and down River Road is
All right.
going to the GE Research Circle and then over to Van Antwerp and down. Like anybody who drives that circle knows that it's actually sometimes a little dangerous to do that because the people who are coming south on River Road don't expect you to
Right.
continue around the traffic circle. So yes, it's of
Okay.
those trips.
Of
You
those
would
trips.
get 90% diverted, and that seems to be a standard that is accepted across the
Okay, sorry I'm so
engineering.
dense here. Thank you.
So can I just ask something? Hi, it's Ellen.
Yep.
So, hi. So listen, listening to all of this, so I guess my concern, I guess, is how much of that traffic increase would involve, the high school, like once they, that much more. I understand the Windsor court, but you also have the corridor that the high school and the buses come out of there, and the ShopRite. Are they going all the way back up to or are they going to cut over on Van Antwerp? Do you know what I mean? Or are they going to go all?
Yeah, listen, this is best engineering practices for estimating those purple lines. It doesn't take into account other trips that are still going to potentially use that. They're saying that the majority of trips are going to be the ones that you already see, but they only analyze that purple line in this traffic study. And that's one of the things that, that is still a hole that the planning board may say, okay, well, except the planning board felt like 932 cars is a lot of cars. So, and I think this was said at the beginning of the meeting, if you add more intersections, you add more points, it's going to be more cars.
Right. So I totally understand that. I guess my thing is that those added cars to both of those other intersections during, like, say, when the high school lets out, or, that whole time is,
level of service, that's actually in here. Yeah.
So anyways, so, and I'm not really sure about, you know, how it affects, you know, carbon emissions and stuff like that. So, I'm gonna be quiet now, but
No. It's a
but
really important question. Let me share my screen with you again. It's really important because we hear that a lot, right? Right now in the mornings, the cars back up on Windsor.
yeah, I
because-
know, so I understand that. I understand that, and that'll continue to happen. I think, you know, I mean, I said this before, I guess maybe when we met at the Felds Farm, is that, you know, the school district has a, you know, a, big, you know, whether it all goes through or not, but they're planning on, you know, making it so that there's no more, you know, basic music at the high school in the morning. So that would divert a lot of that traffic, because the parents won't be bringing their middle schoolers to the high school anymore if it all goes through. So while the next 4 years could be, the potential is that, you know, in 8 years that won't exist. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because all those people that are driving their kids to the high school and middle school, their hope is that they put them all in one school based on the information coming out of the, you know, who knows what's going to happen now that we've hit this, you know, bump in the road with COVID. But, you know, anyways, so, yeah, so I have my opinions on whether or not I want it or not. I'm not really sure if they are conducive to this committee, like in the effects of you know, pollution and that sort of thing. So, anyways, I'll keep listening. Bye.
Okay, no, I think that all of those things are important for this committee that you bring up. Yeah, I think it is hard, and recognizing that nobody has a crystal ball, you know? So if the school does something that drastically reduces traffic on Windsor, you know, 8 years from now, I think that's one of the reasons that you just want to make sure that you're trying to provide the most flexibility in design that you possibly can, because nobody has a crystal ball. We just have to be good planners and good environmentalists, because you guys are the CAC.
I had a quick question about the speed statistics. It's on page 24 of 46 of the PDF that Laura sent out. And personal note, I'm one of the persons who always drives the speed limit, and the number of times I've been tailgated on River Road, like, oh my God. So, you know, and I look at those speed statistics, River Road between proposed site entrances, and it's, you know, if you look at the posted speed limit, it's 40 miles an hour. Exceeding speed limit between proposed site entrances is a staggering 86.97%. You know, and again, like coming back to my concerns about speed and safety and all that, like, I don't know, that seems to be like connecting an area where the speed is really low to an area with a high speed limit, and almost 90, not almost, like more than 85% of people are exceeding that speed limit. Did anyone have any thoughts on that?
So are you saying that when they go through the behavior of those drivers, those are the same drivers that may be cutting through? So if they're speeding on River, you think that they're going to want to also speed through the neighborhood? Is that what you're asking?
It's a concern, yes.
Oh, I think that's an interesting, well, I don't know. I think that's an interesting comment. I mean, because we do see people speeding. I mean, the people who are driving through the neighborhood, I said this before, I mean, we see people speeding. And I probably said this before, I took that, you know, the defensive driving course that you can take to lower your insurance. And, you know, they talk about traffic hazards and all the things that are supposed to make you slow down, and, you know, pedestrians and kids at bus stops, and people don't do that. It's very frustrating, you know. And Jeannie and I run through the neighborhood in the morning, and, you know, some of our friends have almost gotten hit because people went through, you know, they didn't stop at the stop signs. So I don't know. I just feel like I feel kind of conflicted here, because I'm kind of, you know, uncomfortable with a lot of the behavior I see right today. And so if we're going to add more to it, it's hard for me to imagine that people are going to suddenly, you know, behave better.
Yeah, but I mean, I live on, again, Morgan is a straight road right off Route 7. And do we get people that drive too fast? Yes. But I wouldn't say that people coming off Route 7 necessarily drive excessively. And we've had the town look at it, and 30 miles an hour, people aren't necessarily speeding. A lot of people are below that. I mean, we did have some problems with some teenagers dragging on our road, you know, hitting 60, 70 miles an hour by the time they got to Route 7, you know. But I think that would happen on any road, you know. I understand the concern here, but I'm looking at the circuitous route here, and I can't imagine that someone going, you know, 50 miles an hour on River Road, which is wide and a straight shot, is going to make a left or a right-hand turn onto the Kelp Farm and maintain that speed and make the left and then make a right onto Windsor and go.
Well, you don't think once they hit Windsor, they're going to go?
Well, what stops someone from coming out one of the other existing side streets and going?
They do go. That's what I'm saying. It would be interesting to have a speed study on Windsor.
Yeah.
So that sign that measures speed that was put up on Windsor a couple weeks ago does collect that data. Unfortunately, as we all understand, there's not nearly as many cars, and the driving habits may be slightly different right now. So it's probably not a really good representation of what usually happens on Windsor. But we are trying to collect some of that data to see.
I have a question. I saw in the chat that Paul and Connie Trigger were writing about having a multi-use path without the cut through for vehicles. Is that something that was discussed already? Or is that not an option at all, that if you build this development that you'd have to have the cut through and not in?
So the planning board had a 3.5 hour to 4 hour meeting, trying to go back and forth with the residents, listening to their concerns, trying to have the residents understand, you know, why the planning board would want to at least look at the connection, and then kind of decide where they land. Because building consensus is a really good and important thing. Compromises generally make everyone unhappy, but they may be the right thing to do. Not everyone on the planning board is in favor of this, but some of the planning boards asked, you know, to see what it would look like. We have in the past left room for a connection or built the connection and put a crash gate, which would allow for emergency vehicles to go through, but not traffic. And I think there are definitely members on the planning board, because they feel the traffic is high. And, you know, at least where the world is right now, with people driving cars and still owning cell phones, the distraction of the driving right now and everything like that, maybe driving gets safer if all of the cars self-drive and go the speed limit. And, you know, maybe that's only 5 years, 10 years in the future. Maybe that never happens again. So you don't really know what you're planning for. But I think that there is a willingness to look at a compromise, because some things have changed since the comprehensive plan was written, and because there is potential for things to change in the future. Again, I think that the flexibility, I think that they want to make sure that the flexibility is there. Not all the planning board is in favor, but there are, certain things you can do. Like, again, build the connection and don't make it, or leave room for the connection is also a possibility.
One of the
a quick follow-up question on that, and again, my apologies if this is wrong. One of the emails that you forwarded to me in that PDF, one person actually quotes verbatim from the 2013 Comprehensive Development Plan for the town of Niskayuna, and this person says on page 39, begin quotes, "There may be an opportunity to connect Old Niskayuna to these facilities, Blackneck Park and Little League Fields, by extending the Windsor Drive multi-use path to River Road. The multi-user path extension was originally part of the planned Windsor Drive extension. However, the presence of wetlands had made further land development in this area non-economical and the road extension unlikely to be built. Given the importance of the neighborhood link, the town should work with the current landowner and identify possible extension of the multi-use path," end quotation. So it seems that there is already some stuff regarding this on the comprehensive development plan. But if this is misquoted, my apologies. I just read the email that you
sent. I can speak to that directly because we had a long discussion on that. So if you go back to...
Sorry, background. Dart was on the comprehensive plan committee. Ashok, he was on the committee.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Thank you.
If you go back to 2003 in that comprehensive plan, Windsor Road went straight through to River Road, and that was the intent of the original developer to go and put that through. But what happened was the developer did not want to do the development because it wasn't economical to him at the time, so he basically just stopped developing. And that was unfortunate because the multi-use path couldn't go through. We couldn't provide the conductivity. So part of that discussion was that even if the Celts property wasn't developed, and at that time, there was no developer at the time, what we wanted to do was we wanted to encourage the town to work with the owners of the Celt farm to basically put the bike path in without a development going in that parcel and connecting it. So that wasn't that if a development comes through, make sure the bike path goes through. That was really, if no development goes in there because of the wetlands, the town is encouraged to pursue that with the current owners to put the bike path through. Because in the other part of the master plan, it talks about, the need for this conductivity for the road to go through.
Thank you.
That's the context behind that. Yeah.
And we did talk about this also. Reviewing for environmental impacts to communities and things, that a lot of people felt that it is unfair because when the comprehensive plan was written, it was not likely for that. The information that the town had when that comprehensive plan was written was that it was very unlikely for that parcel to be developed. I know when I first came to the planning department, I had a different developer look at that property, and he did not think that that property could be developed. So I think there was a representation by developers to the people in that neighborhood that was an undevelopable land. There's certainly parts of the comprehensive plan, which is very frustrating to people like Connie Trigger and other people who read through it, that because of the information at that time, are maybe contradictory to what's going on now. So there's, I think, a frustration with the lack of feasibility that has been there before. And I think I said this at the planning board meeting. I think that's partly because the stub was paved to go directly into the wetlands. And Joel came up with an idea that goes around the wetlands. And it seems fairly obvious, but for whatever reason, it wasn't obvious. And so now you have something where a person does think it's economical to develop this land. And so then you kind of have to go back to, it is, if you can do it, like, what is the right way to do it now?
Yeah. Part of the reason, though, for the stub being there was in the past, and I'm thinking about Lori Lane and the conductivity through there. In the past, the town didn't require the developer to necessarily put a stub to indicate that the road would extend. And there were concerns by residents, particularly when that particular conductivity development was going in, that they didn't know about it. So the town specifically made sure that the developer put a stub there to signify that it would go through, or it was the intent of it to go through. But I would say that in the 2003 plan, this was before the wetland question even came up. That comprehensive plan says that that road will go through and provide conductivity. I mean, it was pretty, it wasn't until much later that that came up. Actually, large bulk of the properties were built.
Kelt's farm was actually high and dry. I mean, it was a farmer's field before Windsor Phase 4 was put in. It was many wetlands on Windsor Drive. And when those wetlands were filled in and mitigated, they dumped the 24-inch storm sewer onto the Kelt Farm property. You know, so Windsor created the existing wetlands on Kelt Farm.
Windsor Phase 3, I do find some evidence of that in the research of the old files. The Windsor Road stub was approved in 1990, actually, as part of the Rosendale Estates Section 14. Then the Windsor Drive extension to River Road was considered an essential part of Phase 3 of Windsor subdivision. There was a disagreement between the Celts and the town of Niskayuna over the additional stormwater that was, at least in their opinion, diverted to their property. And I think that was part of the reason, or some of the reason, that it was difficult for the town to negotiate, because the town several times tried to negotiate putting a road or bike path. It was actually both. The town has tried to take the land and put a road there in the past. And then during the 2003 comprehensive plan discussions, when they were still working on the Phase 3 of Windsor Drive, the planning board specifically required that the stub should be paved to put people on notice that there was supposed to be a through road in the next round of subdivision. But again, the next round of subdivision was 10 years later, and there was a lot of discussion in that time that, you know, it would be very difficult to build there.
You know, Nora, if you look at the plan, the water course on the north side of the site separates those two single-family homes from basically the other 22. Okay, yep. That was the traditional water course. I mean, I got the maps from 1948, you know, and yep. I looked at it with Celts and everything. Okay, and that water course goes under river and it feeds the pond that's in Blatnick at the pavilion. Mm-hmm. So that is the original water course. Okay, now what had happened is that if you look at the top of the drawing here, that retention pond in that little area, you know, where the stub road is, yeah, right at the stub road, all that water from Windsor now comes down and it dumps into a 24-inch line there that dumps across Kelt's farm and creates that the two pockets of wetlands going across the field. Okay, but, you know, I've been here since '92. That field was high and dry, you know, and I would love to show people the wetlands maps for Windsor. You know, that Kelt Farm is full of wetlands now. Well, Windsor was full of wetlands.
So this is the original drainage path here that has that culvert to the Blatnick Pond here, and then there's a pipe here.
Right, and we're not
for inch here, and then this is making a water course this way. And so if you extend this road directly this way, and then you get into here, there's kind of a free-flowing stream now. And they were saying, you know, this is potentially like box culvert, almost bridge territory when you mess around with these wetlands, because there's a lot of water that comes out of this.
I had a quick question on the, so long as we are talking about the wetlands. I'm looking at page 38 of 46 of the packet that Laura sent out. And there is so there's this, well, an appendix, I guess, full environmental assessment form. And in that, page 38 of the overall PDF and page 2 of that particular form, and it says the proposed action may involve dredging more than 100 cubic yards of material from wetland or water body. And I'm very sorry, I don't know what those D2A, D2B, etc. mean. Like, does anyone know? Like what is the actual impact of the wetland and the creatures that live there, biodiversity, and so on?
Oh, sorry, which page were you on, Ashok?
I'm at the overall page number of the PDF is 38 out of 46.
Oh, 38. Oh.
I'm sorry, English as a second language. Sorry.
What page? Yeah,
48. 48, 30, 48.
38, 38. Oh man, like your 38 looks different from my 38.
Yeah,
like
maybe it's a different PDF file.
So I'm looking at the CAC packet 2020/6320.pdf.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's why.
Okay, you're looking at the one that doesn't have Joel's. You're probably talking about... Yeah, my pages are totally different than yours. Hold on.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's the one that doesn't have the minutes.
Yeah, I can bring that one up to see what you're looking at. Hold on.
Oh my God, did I miss an email that I was supposed to read a different PDF?
No, it's essentially the same. It just
I
has
did the same thing.
I think I read the different PDF.
What page in the EAF? Just tell us what page on the EAF.
On the EAF, it's page 2 of 10.
There we go.
Yeah,
Page
no,
2 of 10, section 3, impacts on surface water. So I'd like to know, what kind of surface water there is right now, what kind of creatures live there, how are they going to be affected, what is this dredging material, what is this code D2A, E2H, etc. In other words, I'm trying to understand the impact on the environment there.
Okay, it's very easy. Look at the plot plan. We are not touching any wetland.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I do not know who you are. Can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, no, sorry, Chicago. I'm Joel. I'm the developer.
Okay. Joel, let me answer this question, please. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Oh my gosh. So what you're looking at, Ashok, is part 2 of the environmental impact state of the environmental assessment form. And part 1 is in the packet that was resent to you. So what you guys do, and I'll show you, is you are going to go through each one of these questions. This is part 2. So he fills out part 1, and then you guys fill out part 2. And so the answers to part 2 are potentially in part 1, but the specific page that you're looking at here, which is why you're asking of the dredging of more than 100 cubic yards of material, these are the questions that you're looking at here. You would, so like if he's not proposing to involve dredging more than 100 cubic yards, so you would go over here and say no to small impact because that's not happening, and you'd put a check mark here. If you felt overall the proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water, and that really wasn't the case because he's avoiding all of the wetlands, then you can just click this button and it'll fill them all. Like, so you're essentially saying overall there's not a big impact to wetlands. If you do feel that there is a big impact to wetlands, then you go through these individual questions and you say the proposed action may create a new water body. And then you would decide if that was no, small impact, or moderate to large impact. And when you go through these questions, you sort of take them all in when you're figuring out what your findings are for the environmental impacts of this subdivision. So I'm just going to open, oops, I didn't go, sorry guys. So what I had up before that section is you're going to look at his answers here for wetlands, and he updated them because the first time he submitted the application, he had proposed to impact wetlands, and then he figured out how to move the road so that he's not in the wetlands. So he would say, would the proposed action cause or result in the alteration or increase and decrease of wetlands? He's saying no. So there is no dredging. So you would go back to those questions here, and you'd say, okay, there is no dredging, there is nobody. There's hopefully this proposed action isn't going to create turbidity in the water body of the wetlands. Would it affect the water quality of these wetlands if he's not disturbing them? All of these kind of go into what is presented to you on the EAF here. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. A quick follow-up question, please. Is there time for me to show this to an expert and get an opinion? Because I feel that I don't have the necessary expertise to like if somebody says like, oh, this won't affect the wetlands at all. I'm not necessarily saying that they are wrong or they are incorrect, but I'd like somebody with knowledge on this to comment on it. So is there time for me to do an outreach and ask some of my colleagues with more knowledge than I do?
So Ashek, that's a really good question. I think you're at a disadvantage because the CAC has seen this proposal and actually the EAF for multiple meetings prior to this one. And the way that the timeline is working right now, because the town has kind of dedicated timelines in our code when we have all of the information given to us, that we're really at a point now that we have to make a recommendation. And so the disadvantage to you is that you're really only seeing this within the last couple of days, whereas the CAC has seen this for a while and different multiple iterations. Typically, you wouldn't be looking at a project within one meeting, like the rest of the CAC people have seen this since February. But if
so
you're
are my CAC colleagues convinced that the wetland is like, okay?
Yeah, but so, I mean, you are welcome to abstain because if you haven't had long enough time to see it and you are the newest member to the CAC, you're welcome to abstain because you haven't had that time to, take a look at the information and figure it out. There's nothing wrong with that. If you do feel like we can go through the questions and you're comfortable still voting, you absolutely can, but you are at a disadvantage because you've only been appointed for a week and a half, maybe a week. Yeah. So
it's hard when you first join the committee because it takes a while to get up to speed, particularly you're cutting your teeth on a particular difficult subdivision.
But
let me go back to my specific question. Like, I respect my colleagues and if they all raised no objections to the the wetlands, then I'm okay with it too.
Yeah, and I mean, in some cases, the CAC, can refer specific questions to the TDE if they feel like they're not comfortable with the understanding of the data that's presented to them, those kind of things. But I mean, you also, you are appointed to this position to make those decisions based on the data that's given to you. So you're just
one of the things we did do is if you had looked at this development in its initial inception, basically we were disturbing the wetlands. There was a road going right through the wetlands, and we've iterated on this proposal multiple times. So the configuration that you see before you tonight is what, like the third or fourth iteration on this. And this latest iteration, the road was moved in order to avoid going through the wetlands or disturbing the wetlands in the center.
Thank you, Dot, for the clarification. That helps a lot.
Okay.
Laura, if I can ask one more quick question, like some time ago, somebody mentioned the idea of compromise, and you said like, I'm very sorry, I forgot the name of the person who mentioned it. Like, how about a bike path and pedestrian path, but no road? And you said like, compromises usually make everyone unhappy, but the but the town in this case, at least they haven't eliminated that possibility. Like I was wondering if you can expand on that a little bit.
So I would say that if you look at the comments from Windsor Drive, I think that I am properly summarizing that they wouldn't like to see any connection at all ever. And that is the sand, the line in the sand that they have drawn. There's very, I think, little opposition from Windsor Drive for the pedestrian bike path. I wouldn't say that's 100% supported, but it's definitely far more supported than any vehicle connection. I think that generally speaking, if it was just a bike path that went through there, the Windsor Drive residents would generally speaking feel like they would be okay. The planning board, if you're looking at planning principles, if you're looking at past practices, if you're looking at the way the road was built through Windsor phase 1, 2, and 3, if you're looking at, the overall plan for the town, that's been enacted since probably the 70s. And if you're looking at connectivity in neighborhoods and, different planning practices that, are just what you put forth when you're looking at reviewing these subdivisions, the connection makes sense. And so I think that's why the planning board asked for it. And that's why, they're reviewing it so thoroughly. If you could do it and you could mitigate traffic such that you're getting as many benefits as you can out of the connection with the least amount of impact to the residents, I think that would be where the planning board would want to land. But if you land somewhere in the middle, you would build the road and potentially have a gate. The gate could be at the Windsor connection, or it could be at the River Road connection. Or you leave space for the road and it doesn't have to be built. Those are kind of a middle road option that the town has used before to mitigate some of the traffic and to allow for the flexibility of, future vehicles that can't speed or something, who knows, whatever. It's just, but probably generally speaking, and I say this is bad planning not to have flexibility in the future, to make that. Putting a house there, and Dart can speak to this, if you do a subdivision and you don't put an easement in, you don't make it so that there is some flexibility for 20, 50, 100 years in the future. It makes it a lot more expensive. It has burdens, that are in the future on future planners that curse your name for not having done the right thing when you first looked at it. And so would that make everybody happy? I think it would probably make everybody super frustrated, but that is a compromise.
One of the things that has come up is that some of the benefits is if you were like on Blair Ridge Road, you would have conductivity to a park. And there's been a lot of studies that if you have conductivity to a park, property values actually go up. So there's multiple factors here, as far as the people on Windsor Drive will no doubt pay the largest price with increased traffic on this particular road. But as a collective in a community, you have to weigh that against the benefit of the total community. So the surrounding streets, there'll be less traffic on surrounding streets because not everybody will be cutting down Blair. Blair will have access to the park directly. People from Windsor will have direct access to the park. It connects the people on this new development to the town center, and they will not have to take a very circuitous route to go there. There's also another facet to this plan, and that is that the town, I believe it's in the ordinance, or it's a planning principle that's in one of the town documents, that does not really want to have cul-de-sacs or developments that are isolated that are greater than 500 feet long. And in fact, proposals have come before the board in the past, and they've been rejected because it was just a cul-de-sac and it was going to, or there wasn't an alternate route. And I'm trying to think of one in the recent history, and I think near the road by the memory care unit on Route 7, when that first originally came in front of the town, that was a cul-de-sac, and they were able to work with the memory care home and provide an additional entrance or something. There was something on that. There is a road right up the road from us where the developer wanted to develop all the way from Route 7 to put a cul-de-sac in, and the town stopped them at 500 feet. So there are situations like that as well. So there's a lot of factors, I guess, that come into play.
Thank you.
Yeah. So do we have other questions for Joel, or do we have other discussions? I think what we have before us is a motion to grant a special use permit. And the special use permit is to allow this. Laura, could you speak to that exactly? What that special use?
Average density development. So
okay. I couldn't think of the word.
It's been a while because we've been talking about a lot of traffic, but the developer has the major subdivision application, and it's required to have an average density development special use permit because he's requesting the flexibility to reduce the lot sizes in order to take advantage of creating more green space. Sometimes these are called average density development. Sometimes they're called conservation subdivisions. They do not allow for any more houses than would be allowed under a regular subdivision application, but they do allow the lot sizes to be smaller, and they allow a diversity of housing, which I think is a benefit to the town of Niskayuna because we don't have a lot of twin townhomes, and they do allow for more green space. And, it's been a while. Go back to the minutes that we looked at. The environmental benefits to that are you have so we're trying to protect that one corner of the forest, which I'm not sure the CAC walked through. The planning board did walk through it. Joel, don't jump in here anymore, but he took us through that forest and through the wetlands. So we can speak to that's pretty high quality forest. It still has witch hazel in the understory. It still has mayapple kind of growing around. It's kind of an intact upstate New York northeastern forest, so white pines. And because when you get back there weren't as many oaks. They did stop high grading. So a lot of the forest that's left in the preserved space is pretty good forest. And we had already recommended that remain forest. We don't need to cut it all down and put lawns. There's plenty of lawns in the park across the street. So we wanted to maintain that intact habitat. And then the other environmental benefit that we talked about before is that they have smaller lawns. And we had talked about advocating, even with the smaller lawns, everybody knows that lawns are a pretty big, they're pretty big inputter of pollution because of the chemicals that go into maintaining them, because of the gasoline that goes into mowing them. There's just a lot that goes on with lawns as far as the environment goes. So having smaller ones, and then we had also thought that maybe potentially in the homeowners association or something, we could ask for a reduction in chemicals on the lawns, or a prohibition. I think that's probably going too far. I think that it's good for us to have the small lawns. I'm not really sure how legally that would stand, but those are the things that we have discussed on the conservation subdivision application before.
Laura, if I hear you right, the forest that you walked through with the mayapple and all that is going to be saved, correct?
Yeah, if you're looking at the plan, I can bring it up again if you guys want, is instead of, let me just pull this up here. Look, I've got the Bobo links on my computer. Yay, that's what a Bobo link looks like. This one. Let me just go here. So I'll just recap, because it's been a while. Oh, I think they're actually up here. So this is what the plan would look like if it was a regular conforming major subdivision that did not require a special use permit from the town board. And each home would have a house on it and a yard, and they could potentially, among themselves, clear their own entire area, because, these would all be individually owned, and you, generally speaking, have a lot of flexibility with what you do on your own property in America. There's zoning code, and then this is the proposal. And so it shrinks the lots down and allows, again, that diversity of housing. So you have the twin townhomes here and you have the single family homes here. And then you have these large sections of undeveloped land where you can keep stuff intact. There's actually lupins growing here. Joel, you should tell people not to dig them over here, because they would be common open space and somebody could have a lupin field behind their house. This is wetlands. These are wetlands that don't get touched. But this right here, and I can show you, this isn't the configuration that you're looking at anymore, but this is probably the best kind of intact upland wooded habitat right here that would be preserved through an average density development right in here. This is where the pine, the white pine, the witch hazel, the mayapple, there's kind of a nice ecosystem going on right here.
And again, forgive my ignorance, first meeting, like what is preventing the developer from coming back 5 years later and saying, wait, I changed my mind, I own the land, I want more houses in there?
Well, it's dedicated to the town. We had talked about it going into a homeowners association, but the CAC, I think, specifically recommended that it be dedicated to the town. I've brought that through a couple committees. The town is fine with that. So the town would own this as part of the developing. The developer turns the roads over to the town, and he turns the green space, this habitat would be dedicated to the town so that it would be preserved in perpetuity. It also would be very difficult to develop because it doesn't have road access. You wouldn't be able to meet zoning code to add additional houses here. It's pretty safe.
And what would the town zone that green space as? Like what, like, I know there are different zoning, like R this and R that.
Yeah, it wouldn't get rezoned. You couldn't just zone a single parcel into like land conservation. It is still spot zoning, but you can deed restrict it. But the town owning it, again, it would be very difficult to develop, and the town would have the record of it being, the public space associated with the average density development. I think it would essentially, the town would get into hot water, I think, if they ever tried to sell that land. And again, like, just to meet the zoning codes to develop that land would be very difficult. But if you really wanted to be extra super sensitive to making sure that this was protected, you could ask when the developer deeded the land to the town that he deed it with a deed restriction or a conservation easement. So you can't just lift those. They have to be lifted by the Supreme Court. So you could put something in the deed that this would be forever wild.
I know this is my first meeting, and I don't want to go against my colleagues, but such would be my preference.
It's not, my recommendation is never a bad thing. The more strict you can get with protecting land in the future, probably the better you are.
Is it possible to hand the land over to Nature Conservancy or the Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy or some such?
You're actually probably better off deed restricting it and having it be owned by the town. The nature conservancies, they are actually private, even if they're nonprofit, and there is potentials for them to fold. The way that the Nature Conservancy actually deals with that is that they do tend to deed restrict property that they take over if they can. But they are potentially not organizations that would run in perpetuity. I love the Nature Conservancy, but I think probably the strongest thing to do is have it be town owned and deed restricted. That would be the strongest.
Well, assuming there is no objection from my committee colleagues, that would be my preference. But if there is objection, then I would stand down.
So Laura, I answer this question there. The Nature Conservancy does not want non-contiguous nature areas.
Well, yeah, and they'll try to actually deed things back to towns when they can, with deed restrictions. They don't want to be a land bank.
We tried to give them the wetlands behind Hannaford, and they wouldn't take it.
Yeah, they won't.
So,
no.
Yeah, I want only if you gave land that expanded the Leishkill or something like that, they would take it, but they don't want non-contiguous spots.
This situation is not unique within the town. I mean, the town holds parcels throughout the town. So I am comfortable with the town holding the property and ensuring that it remains forever wild.
So do you guys?
I think Laura's right. It'd be very, very hard to develop that piece of property once this parcel goes in. Perhaps the only way you could really do it is put a flag lot, and that is not encouraged by the town either. You know, so it would be very, very difficult. But I wouldn't see this. I couldn't see this happening if the town owned it. And again, I think if we wanted to restrict the deed, we could discuss that.
Are you guys comfortable starting to go through the questions? We're already at 9. I don't want to cut off any discussion, but I think we can still have discussion as we're going through the questions. I don't know. What are you guys are feeling on that?
Yeah, I'm ready to go through it.
Yep.
Okay. Just gonna pull it up here. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the first question that we need to look at is, sorry guys, if anybody else feel that it's very difficult sometimes when you're looking at pieces of paper to be doing a meeting electronically, I'm just saying. Okay. Impact on land. Will the proposed action involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site? We'd probably want to answer yes to that and then get into the questions, is my recommendation. I'm sorry, can you bear with me for 1 second? I would like to actually fill this out. Okay, here we go. Okay. The proposed action may involve construction on land where depth to water table is less than 3 feet. I'm going back and forth here now. If anybody wants to keep Joel's, answers handy, and I can go through the questions, that would be great. That should be answered on somewhere. Let's see. Also, I really appreciate my double screens at my work. Well,
Laura, it says, I'm looking at the EAF, and it says 90% of the site is well drained and 10% is poorly drained.
okay. I finally found it. I don't know why they can't line them up. Page 11 of 13. Average depth to water table on the project site is 4 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can probably answer no, small impact to that. The proposed action may involve construction of slopes of 15% or greater. That's definitely not the case here.
No.
No.
The proposed action may involve construction on land where bedrock is exposed. I don't think that's probably in here, but I don't think so. Yeah, he answered no, bedrock. No exposed bedrock. The proposed action may involve the excavation and removal of 1,000 tons of natural material. He's got... Don't think this is a huge cut and fill site. I wish they would line them up. I think that's at the beginning. a note of that one. The proposed action may involve construction that continues for more than 1 year or in multiple phases.
I'd have to say yes.
Yeah, I definitely think that's probably true. So then the question is that a small impact or a moderate to large impact? I mean, my recommendation is probably small, as long as he's essentially stop work ordered if the noise is too loud or he's tracking mud on River Road. I think it's typical with this many houses for it to go beyond a year. If the proposal was for it to go for like 15 years, I think that might be a moderate to large impact, but I think that this proposal has a pretty normal timeline. So
Laura, I think I saw a 2025 completion somewhere on Joel's pages.
Because you probably figure at least a year to build the infrastructure, or at least one construction season to do the infrastructure, and then it's going to be a house as the houses sell. So that's pretty typical. The building of the houses is much less of an impact to the community once all the utilities and roads are built. Because you don't have large pieces of equipment out there.
So can I just ask
stuff? So go ahead.
I just have a question. So I guess my question was, how many years does it become then moderate? Because I would have thought it was, moderate, but.
Yeah, we can put moderate. It's up to you guys. If we put moderate to large,
I thought it was moderate. I didn't think it was large. I didn't think it was small.
Yeah, you have to break it into no to small. I know you guys love this form. No to small or moderate to large. And if we select moderate to large, we just have to note that in our findings and speak to whether or not, there's mitigation measures that we require.
Okay, my vote is moderate because I think that it's better to add than to underestimate. That's just my point of view. So whatever everyone else thinks is.
That sounds right.
Yeah, Ellen, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so for 1E, do you guys just want to know? What do you want to note about that then? Is there something that you think that the developer can do to moderate that, like potentially come up or propose a shorter time frame, or do you just want to note that it's moderate because it's 4 years and that you'd like to see the site kept clean and quiet or something?
Yeah, I just think it needs to be managed, Laura.
So I guess my question is, what are some of the? So I haven't done one this large. So I guess my question is, what are the factors that have occurred before that have been upsetting? That have caused concern for the town. I mean, obviously, once the road and the utilities are in, all that's going to be underground and all that stuff is going to be done. So it is just the housing building, but is there something within that housing building that is it has, besides the hours, been an issue? Like, is it extra drainage? Is it, I don't know. So,
well, I mean, those things are all covered by code. So, I mean, and this is just my opinion. If the plan was broken down into multiple phases with kind of no end in sight, and so you felt like you were subjecting the adjacent surrounding residences to construction that could last decades, so that they would sort of be living in a constant construction site, I think that would be, an impact to the neighborhood. But if you're looking at construction that's just going to take a single construction season to finish with the utilities and the road, and then single family houses are going up as they're sold, that's just my opinion. It's very little impact. That's the way that things would be developed. If this was like a lot of roads and it was going to be multiple construction seasons and there wasn't really, a good management plan for how to put it together, then you would be potentially subjecting surrounding residents to like living in a construction zone for an unending amount of time.
Yeah, I think from my thing. I think you brought up noise as one issue. I think cleanliness would be another issue. You know, if there was just a lot of construction debris floating around, nuisance things like smell and stuff. But generally, don't we have that covered if the construction site's not clean, the town?
Yeah.
can-
So I'll just put moderate, needs to be managed, keep the noise down and the site clean. The proposed action may result in increased erosion and vegetation removal. I mean, this site has less vegetation removal than a lot of them that we see because there was a single family home with a large field around it. And again, a lot of the large, beautiful oaks were taken down by the previous owner. The site was high graded. He's not proposing to spread herbicides or anything. I think he's just got limits of clearing.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, with what?
No to small.
No to small. Okay.
No to
Yeah.
small.
So, and
No
I
to
feel like note of that is actually there's less clearing associated with an average density development than a regular subdivision. So,
Laura, do we know that for certain that that there are no plans to use chemical agents to remove weeds and such?
yeah, you would need some pretty. This is a one size fit all kind of EAF, and I know that we're typically used to doing the unlisted because we don't have a lot of proposals that trigger the type 1, but when you have a one size all for the entire state of New York, like this could regulate like a sulfuric acid plant being sited in Rotterdam. I don't know. So some of these aren't going to be particularly relevant. You would need some pretty big permits from the DEC to clear that site with herbicide. Like that's not realistic for this site. A developer wouldn't do that. Like they would just go in, clear the vegetation, and start moving the dirt around.
Okay, thank you.
So it's small, right? That's what you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys want to add the note that there's actually less clearing because of the average density development.
We could put that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
And then not in a coastal area. Is there anything else that you would want to note on impacts to land? This is just the physical disturbance of the land.
I don't see anything unusual.
I don't see anything.
Here, do you guys want to add a recommendation to deed restrict the habitat to the town?
Would that be here, Laura, or would we make that as a
I think it would, because it would. Well, we can go through it. I think this is probably where it would go, though. Or you can put it at the end. Impacts on geological features. The proposed action may result in the modification, destruction, or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms, cliffs, dunes, fossils, caves. My recommendation of that is no.
No.
Impacts on surface water. This is the one you were looking at before, Ashok. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies. So if we want to say yes, then we can just go through the questions and then put any notes we have about the wetlands. If we feel like the developer did a pretty good job avoiding all the wetlands, he's really not impacting them or surface water, we would say no.
As you said, you guys have discussed this before, so I'm going to defer to my colleagues on this.
I think with the changes to the proposal that he's mitigated or, taken into account the wetlands, so doesn't seem to be a impact on surface water or those areas. The way it stands now.
Small. I mean, we could say yes and then just put no to small. If you wanted to
Yeah, I have a question, Laura. When I look down the list, I see item K, that the proposed action may require construction of a new expansion of existing wastewater treatment facilities. Are we talking about just the treatment facility, or are we talking about the infrastructure? I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but is facility just the plant that does the wastewater treatment?
I mean, the way
No.
it's reading the plain terms, it looks like facility.
Okay.
Wait, didn't he talk about this? Didn't Joel talk about this when we toured the site? Did he say that he was going to redirect the way the sewer was going because it was right now going into the wetlands, and he was going to redirect it and build a new piping? Is that what you mean?
That's what Dart was asking, but
that's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely taking out I&I, the infiltration and infiltration. I'm not exactly sure what that stands for. So right now the pipe is really old and it's made out of clay and there's a lot of roots in it, and so a lot of water is getting into it, groundwater, like regularly feeding the pipe that then goes to the wastewater treatment plant that the wastewater treatment plant doesn't need to be treating. So if he puts in a brand new pipe, then you're reducing all of that water that doesn't need to be going to the wastewater treatment plant, which is really good, because when you get really high levels of effluent going to the wastewater treatment plant at some point, if it's too high, that's when you guys get those. Anybody who signed up for the Mohawk River notifications to get a notification that, you know, things are being directed into the Mohawk River. So the more you can take out of the pipe that shouldn't be there, the better.
So I was thinking that was a positive thing.
Yeah, it's definitely positive. Yeah, there's no question about that.
So I'm looking at, maybe I misspoke. It wouldn't be K, it would be under I. I mean, you could make a note that's saying that we're going to get rid of the new sewer pipe will avoid the leakage.
Okay, so let's put really no small impact to surface water, and that, you know, that replacing the pipe was potentially going to actually help with surface water quality.
Yeah.
Well, it's more like groundwater going into the wastewater treatment plant, but I'm sure it still helps. Okay. The impacts to groundwater. Okay, so that's actually very similar. Maybe we can sort of put them together.
So I'm sorry, can I just ask one quick question on that last one? So we're saying that it's small, right? It's a small.
Yeah, I mean, I would make that you know, he doesn't have any current plans to disturb the wetlands, but you know, you are making detention basins and you are changing some of the water.
And you're definitely adding concrete and, you know,
and
impervious surfaces that all this is going to run off of. So it definitely is something. It's not nothing. So
yeah,
as long as that's noted, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so increasing surface area. Oops. Wait a minute. It's not right. Oops. Gosh dang it. Okay. Impacts to groundwater. The proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have potential to introduce contaminants to the groundwater or aquifer. I think the answer to no to that is no. Again, you're helping with that pipe. Anybody have any other comments on that one?
No. So is that where you put in right? I don't know. Because that's where the extra runoffs, of like insecticides and stuff like that. Is that where that goes in? Do you know what I mean? Like if people.
That would probably be surface water, right? So groundwater typically doesn't have that interaction with the surface. It's talking about whether you're having additional demands on cells, whether or not you're going to contaminate the aquifer with petroleum based, or what do you call it?
Yes. My mistake. Sorry about that.
So if we want to go back to surface water, do we also want to know, that there's some impact with now people would potentially putting lawns.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do want to put that in there. I'm sorry. I thought
Some impact.
I gotta put it up on my screen so I can see exactly what part we're reading. I gotta do
I
that.
can share. Do you want me to share, or do you want to put it on your screen?
Either way.
I like sharing, unless you guys don't want me to.
Did
I
that
have a
help?
double screen that might make it easier. Hold on.
Yeah.
I wish my screen was bigger. That's why I'm like staring at everybody's my laptop. Okay. Okay. So here's the impacts to surface water. I side note when you guys, have, but again, like when I click no, we don't have to answer all the rest of the questions when I click no here.
Mhm.
And then I just put a note, for the pipe.
Thank you.
Yeah. And over here is the EAF that he filled out. So over here is the EAF that we're filling out. So impacts to groundwater, impacts on flooding. The proposed action may result in the development of land subject to flooding. I think that the top 3 questions here are flood designated flood areas for the the National Flood Insurance Program. It's not in a designated floodplain, but you could look at the proposed action may result or require modification to existing drainage patterns, may change the way the water flows that contributes to flooding. And I don't really think it's a damn question. So probably this question here is, is this bigger? It's probably tiny on your screen. Oh no! I'm thinking that's it. Sorry, guys. Okay. Yeah. So that's your call.
Relevant. So wait, what are the choices?
So I think you could put no small again. The proposed action may result in or require modification of existing drainage. I think almost all subdivisions do that. Again, back to what Ellen is saying, because they're adding impervious surface and you're adding stormwater detention ponds and stuff. That's definitely not exactly what the water did before this proposal. But in the grand scheme of things, the town is an MS4 community. They're not going to approve something that the engineers haven't shown with data that is going to be discharging more stormwater. So the impacts on flooding should be very negligible, but I think that there definitely is a change or modification to the existing drainage patterns.
Okay, so we're gonna put.
So I could put so either you could click yes up here and then no to these guys and then just put a note on here that there's some changes to drainage, or you could put no and then I could just note in our findings that we do note that there is modification to existing drainage. This is the more conservative. Let's go like this.
I prefer that because then that is specific to how we feel.
Yeah. So, still probably no or small, but then I note in our findings, that the reason that we spoke to that is D. Right. Okay, sorry, just writing that down. Impacts on air is the next one. Is it? This is, I think, more for like factories, but is it going to have air emissions? Is it going to and air pollutants? I think, generally speaking, when you're looking at the answer is no.
No.
Quick question, please. If a road is going to be built, then wouldn't that involve like those asphalt machines and?
It does. Definitely not a net decrease in carbon emissions when you take natural land and convert them into a subdivision. There's no question that is going to increase carbon emissions. But if you look at these specific questions, it's a state regulated air emission source. So
I don't want to change. Well, that's right.
Can you hear yourself? Is it Tina? Who's talking?
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's good. So I don't know if this is very specific again because this is a form that regulates things all across the New York. If you look at these questions, you probably can't answer yes to any of them because it's very specific to state regulated air emission source. But there's definitely an increase in carbon that comes from paving roads and adding houses.
Yeah, I'm not just that, but this is a new road, which means there's going to be new traffic through that, so.
Yeah, although actually connectivity usually shortens trips, so it's going to be difficult to say, like, in terms of vehicles, like if a new road is going to add carbon emissions to the existing vehicles, I don't know. I think when you look at natural habitat is going to retain carbon, where once you put single family homes with driveways and lawn, you're not retaining the carbon that natural habitat had. That is not what this question's getting at, though, just so you guys understand.
Okay.
You could put a note in there, but this is regulated air emission sources. That's kind of like a point source pollution versus a non-point source pollution.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to look at it that anytime you change any of the land use, you're going to have impacts. The question, I think, what we're looking at here is the impact excessive or going to really change the character of the town and the surrounding area? So, the way I look at it is, yeah, there's more houses there, and there are going to be more cars in a place that wasn't there before. But the question is are the 24 or 50 cars that are going to be parked in those driveways going to significantly impact the air as it is now? If that makes sense.
But that's not what this question is getting at.
No, that's not what the question's asked.
Yeah.
I was acknowledging that there is impact, but this is much greater than that.
As your planner, I have to tell you, this is not a state regulated air emission source.
I suggest we go with our planner.
Okay.
Okay, agreed.
Impact on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna.
So Laura, were there any concerns about the bats at all? I know when they did this rotary or the roundabout down on River and Rosendale, they had to take the trees down at a certain time.
Yeah, any federally funded project has to fall within the regulated bat window, actually all across New York State, regardless of whether or not there's a documented long-eared bat habitat in the area. But if there's no federal dollars attached to it, then you actually dive into where the long-eared bat habitat actually is. Niskayuna is not in one of the areas that has that heavy regulation. So if there's federal or state funds, I think actually you have to be in that window. Otherwise, and we've gotten pretty clear direction on DEC, whether we like it or not, because I mean, I sort of like the bat window, but this wouldn't be regulated by that.
So I'm looking like at 7D. You're saying that we don't fall into that.
I mean, I would actually probably still put yes, because I think that, there's definitely a loss of flora and fauna. I mean, there's land clearing, but it's probably no or small impact when you go down the questions.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's no endangered species that we've documented.
Yeah.
Is it degrading, rare, threatened, or endangered? No. I love witch hazel. I plant it all over my yard, and lupins are beautiful. Okay, so is it causing a reduction in anything of species of concern? Answer to that is no. Again, there's no species of concern that DEC has maps of those. This doesn't fall into any of them. Proposed action may diminish the capacity of a national natural landmark. No. Designated significant natural community. No. The proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging, or overwintering habitat for the predominant species that occupy or use the project area. Yep, that would probably happen when you cleared property. Although it is, again, being mitigated by the fact that he's doing an average density development instead of a major subdivision. So I don't know, we could go in here. I would probably put small and then note again the average density development there.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
7G. So I'm just gonna put some loss mitigated by the proposed action, conversion of more than 10 acres of forest grassland or regionally or locally important habitat.
No.
And proposed action involve any herbicides or pesticides. He's not proposing to do that, so.
Yeah.
Okay, impact on agricultural resources. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources that are none mapped. So I'd probably recommend no on that one.
Yeah.
Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land patterns between the project and the scenic or aesthetic resources. Because it's surrounded by single family homes and he's proposing single family homes and twin townhomes, and there are some townhouses not very far up the road. I think that you'd probably answer no to that.
I would say no for that, Laura.
Okay, not hearing any dissent. Impact on historic and archaeological resources. Is it an adjacent or historic or archaeological resource? The town had the house on its 1982 historic survey. Unfortunately, Joel went in there and the house was beyond repair. I talked to him about it a couple times because I would protect historic houses, as much as possible. But it was removed with a building permit, and so I think with the removal of that house, we would probably answer no to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Impacts on open space and recreation. Does the proposed action result in a loss of recreational opportunity or a reduction of open space resource as designated in any adopted municipal open space plan? Because it was privately owned and I don't think it was designated in any of our recreational plans.
The way I look at this is it's right next to Bladnick Park. So, I mean, if it was located in a section where the town didn't have a park, or it was adjacent to a park and not separated by a road, where it would provide an improvement to the parkland, I would say yes. But for this particular parcel, I would say no. I don't know if other people disagree with me.
No, I mean,
if you agree, I just
sounds right.
I think, yeah, if it was in a plan, I've said this, and other people have said this. I think the town would have worked to acquire that property and incorporate it into Bladnick Park, but that didn't happen. And it's not on any plan, so I think that's probably no. Impact on critical environmental areas. There are none mapped in this area, so that one's no. Impact on transportation. So will the proposed action result in a change to existing transportation systems?
I would have to say yes.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend putting yes there.
Yeah.
Project traffic increase may exceed capacity of existing road network.
I would say, well, it's the capacity, right? It's not the.
Yeah, I think probably the one question here that is relevant is the proposed action may alter the present pattern of movement of people or goods. Like these, I think, are too big here, and it's certainly not going to degrade existing pedestrian or bicycle accommodations. It's going to make them better, which I think we should probably note.
Yeah,
so
I would put that in F.
That here, and then note on D that it's actually making them better. So then the question there is E.
Well, I think E would definitely have a impact, right? I mean, because really, if you build that development and the question comes through to the connection, if that connection is not made, it has a substantial impact.
Sorry, I was just looking down. I mean, the other places that the traffic I think is going to play a role in our reviewing, is probably consistency with community character. So we can talk about traffic here, and then I think probably looking at the impact to the neighborhood is where I would. It looks like it would fall in here.
Okay.
So it's definitely going to alter present patterns of movement and people or goods. And we've clicked moderate to large. And so in our findings, we would then say, is that going to trigger our recommendation that the project have an environmental impact statement, or are we going to make recommendations to mitigate that?
Yeah.
So that would probably be large impact on present patterns.
Are you going to designate?
Yeah, we'll come back to that when we're doing our determination. I'm just making a note of it so I don't forget. I mean, I probably wouldn't, but you never know with me. Impact on energy. The proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy. It's not going to trigger a substation. No. It's not going to take 2,500 megawatts per year of electricity. I would probably answer no to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Impact in increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting. It's not blasting.
No.
It's not going to result in routine odors. I think that's like for cheese factories and things that do that.
Yeah.
It's not going to have light shining onto adjoining properties. I mean, I think it's like when you build softball fields.
Yeah, I think it's consistent with the surrounding area.
Go ahead, Ellen.
So I just have a question. So there won't be streetlights, correct?
He's not proposing streetlights. No.
I didn't see it there, but just curious.
Would you want to note that there's no streetlights proposed?
So that would be the light factor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I would make note of it.
Yeah, I'll note it.
Do neighborhoods they're not normally made with streetlights, are they?
Depends on where you live. More urban areas typically have them.
Yeah, but in Niskayuna?
I'm thinking of country club, the country club area. They all have lights.
My neighborhood has lights. We pay for them. We have lighting districts in Niskayuna.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, I would not be sad if the lights were taken away from my neighborhood. Impact on human health. Oops, I'm gonna put no. I just made a note that there's no streetlights. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. So then you're looking at things like, is it within 1,500 feet of schools, hospitals, daycares? That's true. It is. The site of the proposed action is currently undergoing remediation. It is not emergency spills. I think the site is very clean. It used to be a cut flower farm. Solid waste management facility. Nope.
Yeah, as long as we're sure there's no dump.
Yeah, there's no contaminant leachate from the project site. I think that's probably a no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we ever check to see if there was any buried gas tanks or something? Because I know a lot of farms at times used to have buried tanks.
We can look. I think this is kind of not an unusual farm, but I'll just put a note to check for buried tanks. If you guys want also, because this is impact on human health, we could also note here that it is increasing. There is an increase in greenhouse gas emissions from converting natural habitat to subdivision. I think that's probably where that would go.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Okay. Getting there. Consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. I would say that is a no. But
Oh, that's a double negative, right?
Double negative, yeah.
wait, yeah, is that right? The proposed action is not consistent.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
not consistent.
Oh yeah,
not-
it's not. Yeah, okay. But
Yeah.
you know, that's something that you guys might want to discuss because not everyone agrees with that.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the questions, Laura, and then maybe we
Okay.
can talk about it.
So the proposed actions land use components may be different from or in sharp contrast to current surrounding land use patterns.
No.
The proposed
Well, doesn't the traffic do exactly that in sharp contrast to current patterns?
The current actions land use components may be different from or in sharp contrast to land use.
See, I think that goes further up to where the traffic patterns are, the transportation patterns.
Land use
we
is
can revisit it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that if you answer no to every single thing except for traffic, that doesn't mean that you can't have a finding that the traffic impact is big enough to warrant an environmental impact statement. I don't know. And
Laura,
sorry,
what is this environmental impact statement that you keep referring to? Like, what does that mean?
okay, so the seeker process is the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and what it does is it requires that communities review the environmental impacts to a project, and if they find that the environmental impacts are great enough under the state of New York's law, the developer then has to come up with alternatives and take a hard look at each of the environmental impacts that are identified as problematic. And then it has a whole nother process. So you have to have public hearings for the environmental impact statement. You have to then review the proposals that would, mitigate the effects of the environment and take a look at any of the alternatives and then come back. It's not saying that if you do an environmental impact statement that the project can't move forward. It's just saying that you feel that the environmental impacts are large enough that it requires a much higher degree of reviewing alternatives and stuff like that. They're rare. They're typically for large, they're typically for like very large subdivisions, for big commercial developments. Like in Niskayuna, we had one for the Hannaford, I think. We had one for James Square. We had one for, they're around. And we've certainly recommended them and been overruled. But it's a much harder look at environmental impact, really. And it has a whole
process. I can think of, Laura, that we did recommend, but then the developer changed his plans. There was a church in a residential area off Providence, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to put an office building in there. I think it was the Methodist Church. And I think the committee recommended a positive deck there to look at alternatives. And once we did that, the church found another church to go in there.
Yeah, I think, and I could be wrong, we recommended one for Mansion Square, though, and they never did one. I think.
Yeah, we did recommend Mansion Square, and the town board ignored it.
Yeah, so it does, but so essentially, like in the Mansion Square case, I think the CAC said, this is too big of a change to the character of the neighborhood. It's trees. It's this one last sort of green space in this area, and taking it away is a really, 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 really big deal. So they felt like you really had to review what the impacts were to the community on a much, much more detailed scale. And I think, there may have been some other things in there. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think probably the answer to most of these questions is really no. And then you have to dive in with the, the traffic and decide if that triggers.
Yeah, that one in particular, talking to that, when the committee recommended the positive deck for that, there were specific issues that were raised, and they included not only traffic, retail, loss of habitat or green space. There was probably about 6 or 7 items that were identified.
Which is typical. It's usually a combined thing. A lot of times, if it's one, you can think of ways to mitigate and let the planning board work through it. But I'm not saying that you're bound to anything. You just answer the questions and then you come up with findings.
Yeah.
And I know it's getting really late. I appreciate everybody's patience.
So why don't we continue on with the questions? Are we okay with where we are on? What I guess what I'm recommending is we know that there's a problem with the transportation. So if we go through it, we can make sure that we write something about the transportation in the recommendation if we so choose.
Which is part 3. Yep.
So I would suggest we move on.
Okay. So I would say that generally I would answer 17 as no, because it's not inconsistent with the land use plans or zoning regulations. No. It's not inconsistent with county plans. It's not going to change. Proposed action may cause a change in the density of development that is not supported by existing infrastructure. So it's not changing the density of development because it's not allowing density beyond what would be allowed under an R1 zone. Right. Proposed action is located in an area characterized by low density development and require new or expanded public infrastructure. That's not really the case, and the developer is taking care of the existing at capacity sewer line that's going through that property. And will the proposed action result in a secondary development impact? The proposed action may induce secondary development impacts. Residential, commercial development not included in, So I don't think they would do that either because there isn't really any land for that to happen on. So I'd probably recommend no on the consistency with community plans.
Yep.
And then consistency with community character. The proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. I would definitely probably recommend putting yes there because we do feel like that's a lot of cars that's going through. And I know that we have heard and stated, and I do agree with Dart, that the people who live on Windsor Drive would have an increase of traffic, which on a residential street that they have, is going to change some of the community character. I think it's potentially built for that capacity, but because it doesn't have it there right now, I think you should probably mark yes.
Yeah, so that would be G, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so let's see. Proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community. That's no. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services. Probably also no. Proposed action may displace affordable or low-income housing. No. Proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of official, recognized, or designated public resources. No, we actually already talked about that in a different one. The proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character. No. The proposed action is inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape. I think that's probably no too. So you probably want to put that in other impacts is where I would put that.
Laura, a quick follow-up on 18E. You mentioned these are like twin homes and smaller houses. Like, aren't they different from the architectural scale and character that is currently present at that end of Windsor Drive?
Yes, I would say that is definitely true when you compare them to Windsor. If you're comparing them to the homes that are, I would definitely say that they're different in architectural scale and character. Yeah, that's true. So I guess the question is that small or moderate to large? And the only reason I'm asking that question is because the trade-off with the reduction in the size of, the lots is that you're getting this diversity of housing, and then you're getting all the environmental benefits that come with the green space that's being dedicated to the town. The way that you could potentially get them to be in conformance with the architectural lot sizes and setbacks and stuff on Windsor would be to increase the sizes of the lot and go back to a regular subdivision, which then has its other environmental benefits. It's a balance. Anyway.
We're trying to encourage the open space with the development.
Yeah, so is the answer small? No to small?
Yeah, but note that it is definitely a different architectural scale.
The one comment I would put, the action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of official recognized public resources. I actually think that's a positive there, because what it's going to do is to open up Bladnick Park. So what I'm proposing in G is let's put 2 items there. One would be what was the? It's getting late.
I know. So sorry, guys.
No, that's all right.
So other, I think, would be increasing traffic on a residential
right.
street. On residential street.
But I would also say that it will enhance the accessibility of Bladnet Park.
Mm-hmm. So you put that under
the bike trail,
right? Increases use.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, because it also includes the connectivity of the bike path, which is what a lot of will be utilized by lots of people.
Yep.
Okay. So D has increasing use of park and connectivity of bike path. E has small impact. It's definitely a different scale to Windsor Homes, but that's a trade-off with the green space. That's actually protecting these homes from the Windsor Homes. Yeah.
Yep.
And then G, other impacts, is increasing traffic on the residential street.
Are we? I'll let you finish.
I that's what I got. Do we want to add something else?
Are we capturing D right? Because D, as written, says it may interfere with the enjoyment. Instead, we're going to say it enhances. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, because we're putting no, and then as a no,
okay.
It's
all
just
right.
the opposite. It's increasing the use of the park.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear that we put in, we're increasing the use of the park, but we've also put down that we're increasing, the ability to get to the bike path, right? That was also in there.
Yep, I put that in there.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I thought so, but.
So when we vote on this, or when we make a motion, basically we're talking about the special use permit, and we can either say it has no environmental impact, which is the form we filled out. It basically has nothing. We can say that it has a positive environmental impact, which will require the developer to look at alternative plans and set up another process that the town would have to that the developer may have to go through. Or we can say that there's ways to mitigate some of the issues that we have found and do what is a conditional negative deck with comments, which we've done in the past. Just so everybody knows what exactly we're talking about this particular proposal here.
From the outset, I have thought that, that all of I would think that he has mitigated it, because we have said that we would just put in a bike path, and 2, we have said that we would build the road but not make it connecting. Those are the 2 options that are still on the table, and are definitely, I think, should be considered.
Okay, I would say there's a third one to put traffic calming devices on Windsor.
Yes, can I just ask?
That's a third option there.
It is a third option. Can I just ask? So who pays for that?
Yeah, when we're talking about the corridor of Windsor, it may go beyond what would normally be required of a developer to put, 20 single family and twin townhomes. So probably the town would have to kick in funds on that if they were, pushing for the connection because of the connectivity. The developer might have to contribute some, but it's probably also would have to be a town cost.
So I think that should also be stated, because I think that is another reason why you would or wouldn't connect.
Yeah, I'm going to raise an issue though here. If this road doesn't connect, then we're basically butting up against another town reg that basically says that we can't have a cul-de-sac greater than 500 feet. And this, by not connecting this road, I think what it does is it sets the town up for additional cul-de-sacs. This is not an issue that's unique to this particular area. Every time you sort of do development, you run into this, and I would be very concerned if we propose this right out of the box and said that we would block the connection. Yeah, the rest of you can feel differently, but I'm feel very strongly about that.
So yeah, I think what part of the question is, as our role as a CAC, is this that enough that we should be blocking it, whereas other, like the town board, actually would have another chance, right, based on the public feedback.
So we're really not blocking it. What we really just need to hone in on is, do we feel, I mean, really the only thing that we, hit that was a moderate to major impact is the additional traffic that this proposal would add to Windsor. So what you really want to hone in on is, do you feel like the additional traffic that would be directed onto Windsor there's engineering solutions and traffic calming things that would potentially have to be paid for by the town, because it's the large open part of Windsor where people might pick up speed is relatively, I mean, it's closer to the Van Antwerp intersection, I think, where it really starts to open up. So the question would be, does the connection, because it's in conformance with town plans and, was built and it has connectivity, can we do it in a manner that will limit the impacts to the people on the Windsor Drive and provide all those benefits to the existing population in the town of Niskayuna? Or if we don't feel that it could be done with traffic mitigation, or the benefits to the rest of the town don't outweigh the impacts to the people in Windsor, would you want to say that the plan is good, but the EAF is contingent on not opening the road? Or do you feel that that the whole thing needs to have a larger environmental impact study, and your recommendation would be that there's a positive impact on the environment and you would want the process to go through an EAF? Which is, by the way, I mean, that's not stopping the project. It's just a much harder look at the environmental impacts.
And then, is that something that Joel then needs to do? That's on his shoulders to do, the EAF.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, again, it's unusual. It's not unusual. I mean, if the environmental impacts are there, they're there. But it does add quite a bit of process to the review. There's no question about that.
Well, so I think we would have to address the impact that we've found. So I would think that if you did a positive deck, you would identify the traffic, and you would require him to do further traffic studies. I mean, that would be potentially that. I don't know if that's
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think that's the description that would be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think probably someone would make a motion on how they feel and then go to discussion. And then, because I think, right, and this is true of a lot of these projects, it's difficult and you're not really going to know where people stand until you start with a motion.
So I would propose that we propose a negative deck with conditions, because that seems to start with the middle ground.
Yeah, so like a negative deck because of the sort of positives with the average density development and some of the things that are being mitigated through the special use permit. but conditions to address the traffic.
That would be my preference, but, feel free to.
I think that I agree with that because I feel like the alternatives are really harsh on Joel and I don't think it's his fault. I don't know, because I feel like it's more the planning, trying to conform with the town plan rather than what he's trying to do.
Well,
that make sense?
I wouldn't feel sorry for the developer.
Okay.
I think if you feel that there is an impact to the town that needs to be mitigated by doing a positive deck, you should say that. Don't take Joel's position, because Joel is the developer and he took risks when he bought this piece of property. We need to protect the town interests here, not his.
Okay. Well, I'm still very confused because I'm still concerned about the traffic, and I don't know if I have enough information to know, how we could mitigate it without, I don't know. What do other people think?
So sorry, I just have to jump in here. You are not taking the developer's interests. You don't have to feel sorry for them, but you do have to treat them fairly and consistently with what you would review for other subdivisions. So you can't.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mean to say that.
I'm just verifying the record. You still have to be fair and consistent.
I want to correct the record too. I don't want to be taken out of context.
So I guess, so this is where I stand, is that I'm very concerned that for the number of homes that we are putting in, that the amount of through traffic that would be more than the town. What I'm concerned about is that the number of people that live in the town, I'm not sure the number of people that live in the town would utilize that as much as the people that don't live in the town. Is that as a cut through, I guess. But maybe I'm incorrect and I'm off kilter, but I'm very happy for the bike path.
That's a question, right? I mean, isn't that a legitimate question? What Ellen's commenting on?
I think so, and that's one of the things that I have struggled with a lot. That we've heard a lot of opposition, but we are kind of taking it on face value that yeah, it's actually good for the town, and we don't have a lot of data from people saying they really support this position. And separately, I have 2 small children. My wife's about to blow a gasket, and I kind of need to go soon. So I may leave in the next 5 minutes.
We don't normally go this late, just so you know, right? This is the longest I think I've been on a meeting in.
Not all the meetings are this long.
Yeah, so sometimes they do, but so I guess Dart's motion is for a neg deck because of the sort of positive aspects on the environment that come with an average density development, understanding that, the developer does have a right to do something with the property to begin with. And then conditioned with some way to mitigate traffic, like either with traffic coming on Windsor or potentially like a barrier. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any comments or discussion on the motion?
So I think I'm just going to, so for me, so that NASDAQ means that it's, that's a negative, so that's a positive. So is that correct? Is that what I?
Yeah. So Ellen, if you were leaning towards, you feel like you don't have enough information and you don't really like the configuration the way that it is, and you think that it's too much of environmental impact without further review, I mean, that would be that you felt like that would have a positive deck, right? So you would vote no on the motion, if that's the way you feel. I'm not putting words in your mouth.
No, that's it. So I'm going to vote no for me on the motion.
Okay, no, that's fine. I mean, if you feel that they they can't necessarily be mitigated without further study. That I think is perfectly fine.
So I feel like it can be. I definitely think that it needs to be further studied. My biggest concern is the number of town people. So I mean, I know that they love, that circle that we're putting in is going to be good for the town, but it's good for the town because half the people that are using it are coming from Colony. So, and that's going to help with that traffic flow there and might mitigate some of other traffic. But yeah, I just think there's too many variables, and I would really, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get more information to appease me, and maybe I'm a safer than a sorry kind of person, I think. Sorry.
It's completely fine. That would be another motion. So, Claire, do you want to call a roll, and then people can just explain their vote, and then we'll just see where it falls. And if it doesn't pass, then there's a counter. Then there's a counter motion.
Okay, sure. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it from the top and just roll through the names. But Ashok, I can call you first. I know you might have to cut out in a minute here. So I'm calling the roll for the vote on Dart's motion to grant a negative declaration.
With conditions.
With conditions.
Wait, can I ask, so what did by putting the conditions, what exactly does that, what is the power of those conditions?
So essentially, if you
what I was thinking was you would put traffic calming on Windsor. That would.
Yeah, so if you conditioned a recommendation, it would essentially mean that, the recommendation relies on those conditions, and it's null and void if those conditions, are met, which would be that there is some mitigation for that traffic, like in some form or fashion. You would have to find a way so that it wasn't so impactful to the neighborhood.
Okay, but it's not saying you have to reduce the impact by this much. It's not really, it's going to open.
I think it would be really difficult to do that, again, because the traffic study may not even incorporate all the cars that would use that cut through because it's limited to that purple line. So, yeah.
So
I would recommend putting a specific threshold just because it's difficult to measure and implement that.
Right. So yeah, that's why I get confused, because if the subdivision didn't actually have the street connection to it, then there's no problem with, I don't have any issue with the subdivision. It's just the street.
I know, but so you guys need to take action on the plan that's before you. So that's what I was explaining to Joel. So this is the one that was referred to you, and you either feel that it can be completed with, mitigation on that traffic impact, which is Dart's motion, or you feel like the impacts to the environment are significant enough that you would like to see an environmental impact statement prepared on the traffic.
Okay, I know it's getting late. I'm going to vote no.
Okay, and just so to make it clear, then the only condition is traffic calming on Windsor.
Yes, for me,
so
yes.
Dart's motion is a negative declaration with the condition of traffic calming on Windsor.
I think.
Okay. So I'll call the roll then. Okay. Ellen.
So I'm for. So
you're no.
I'm no. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Amanda.
I am yes.
Jeannie or?
I guess I'm a yes, but I really do want to know that there is going to be serious mitigation for the traffic.
Okay. Tina?
Okay, I'm saying no.
Okay. Chelsea?
I'm yes.
Okay. Jill?
She's
not present.
Oh, right. Sorry. Catherine?
I'm a yes. And and I'd like to stress that they really study and come up with some good traffic mitigation. And I really do think that we have to honor the complete streets and the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Ashar?
Considering that this is my first meeting and it's a very controversial issue, I'm abstaining.
Okay. Dart?
I'm going to say yes.
So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 1 abstaining, and 1, 2, 3 noes.
Yeah, the motion carries. Tough one. Thanks, guys. So
Bye.
I'm going to put together an environmental part 3 that goes through the way that we went through the environmental impact statement and notes all the notes that we had, and then do a neg deck with the condition that the traffic is mitigated through traffic calming on Windsor or other means. Is there any other notes that we want to send to the planning board? And I also noted how people voted and why.
Laura, you mentioned that there is a way to make this land like forever safe, like there's some kind of clause.
Oh, the deed.
Yeah.
You want to put that in there? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, like who knows what the future will bring, and with the loss of so much wild space, I would like that to be inserted.
Yeah, so we'll do deed restriction to green space. Yep, that's a great call. Yep. Anything else?
Hey, thank you for having me. I really need to go take care of my kids. I gotta go. Okay. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. You know what happens when they get older? They just eat without you.
Okay. I'm falling asleep. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Wait,
So
can
really, yeah. Is there anything else we want to add?
So we have the Forever Wild and we have traffic mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'm also noting the dissents. That's normal for the for split motion, which is it's important.
So I thought it was only 2 dissents, but
it is. It's only 2 with 1 abstain.
But he said, I thought
he said 3. He said 3 no's.
So that's why I just thought it was only 2. But I could. I mean, it's been breaking up here, so I could have mistaken it.
Yeah,
but
I had Ellen as no, Tina as no. Oh, and Jill was not here. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, you probably wrote no because she wasn't.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It is getting late.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Good catch. Good catch. No, that's good.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have anything else to discuss about this particular EAF?
No.
So I'm just gonna throw this. I don't know. So about buses going through there. Is that a I guess it's a regular road, so it would be an avenue for buses as well.
They have to pick up kids, right?
Yeah, you would want buses.
School buses?
No, I know buses.
The planning board has talked about like a weight restriction to limit commercial traffic, and signage for local traffic only. And those are all, I think, traffic mitigation things that would be incorporated with the neg deck at the planning board level.
Actually,
I'm not saying I guess I was for the buses going through there, but I'm just saying that is one more, and does that, and I guess also, does that include like dump trucks and stuff like that, or?
The weight limit does not restrict buses or essential services, but it does restrict commercial traffic.
Okay.
And what is I should have asked this earlier. What does local traffic only mean, and how is that enforced?
And it means essentially it's meant to prohibit cut through traffic. It's very difficult.
You have to live on Windsor. You have to live on Windsor.
It's like an honorary thing. But you know, sometimes when people see that, it will turn around people who aren't familiar with the neighborhood because they might think that that means it's a dead end or it doesn't connect or something.
Except everyone has Waze, and Waze will say, go this way. And they'll be like, okay, I trust Waze. And then they'll go.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Laura,
I know there's a lot.
They have that restriction.
Sorry, Joel. At this point in the meeting, it wouldn't be, we closed it to the developer comment. Sorry. Just trying to keep to the rules. And so I think we should probably restrict comment too to anything additional that we want to send to the planning board because we had so much discussion and it is getting so late. I'm not trying to cut anybody off. I know that we all have really important questions, but it is a split vote, so we're probably never going to get to a place that's perfect. And the question is, do we want to add anything further?
I think I'm good.
Okay. So let's move on to discussion items. Laura, is there anything we need to discuss?
No, I specifically left the rest of the agenda blank because I knew this was going to be a long one.
Okay. So there's no reports?
Nope.
And does somebody want to take on number 8, adjournment?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I moved to adjourn.
That was quick.
Aye.
So was that Tina?
Are you going to call it?
Wait, so
who made the motion?
Yeah, who moved and seconded? There was a lot of noise.
I don't know.
I think
Did
Tina made the motion to adjourn and seconded, correct? I think that's who I heard, but
I think Jeannie did. Yeah.
Okay, so Tina and then all in favor?
Tina.
Aye.
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 Anybody against?
Oh my gosh.
It's been a long time since we've had a meeting this long. I mean,
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, guys.
Bye.
That was awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, Laura and
Bye.
Clark.
Bye. Good night.